order the regular Board of Trustees meeting for March 28th, 2023. Will you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Clerk, will you call the roll, please?
Mayor Parsbeck.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Grace.
Here.
Trustee Hardy.
Yes.
Trustee Sorcelli.
Here.
Trustee Murphy.
Here.
Trustee Ayers.
Here.
Trustee Butler.
Here. All right, thank you. Next on our agenda is citizen participation. This is for anything that is not on tonight's agenda, excluding the Ludlow Neighborhood Master Plan. If you're here tonight and like to speak on that, that's fine. Kind of make an exception for that just because the developer is extending. In addition, because it will be a public hearing, the board won't be entertaining any kind of dialogue on that. So we'll hear you out and that'll be that. And I will be keeping it to 3 minutes or less. So thank you. So we'll start with Mr. John Keller. And even though you wrote it down for the record, would you please state your name and address?
Yep,
Thank
John
you.
Keller, 311 Cheyenne Drive. Want to talk about the Ludlow Farm really fast. I live on the corner, basically on the corner of Spartan and Bertha Parkway, which is right across Bertha Parkway for the Ludlow Farm proposed development. I have no ill will towards them. It's their land, go ahead and develop it. What I was kind of taken aback at the Planning Commission a couple weeks ago, when they approved it, a lot of people spoke about utilities, water, gas, electric, and the Planning Commission put it off and said, oh, we put the notice out to those utilities and it's up to them to respond. People ask about schools, and so that's not under our purview. Someone else is gonna look at that. Talk about the fire department, the police department, like that's not up to us. Seems like a development of this size with proposed 1,500 to 1,800 units, and that's somewhere around 7,000 folks. Seems like it should be a coordinated effort with all those different inputs for schools and police and fire and water, but the Planning Commission had none of that. So I think it's short-sighted if you go forward and approve it without having a comprehensive look at how is it gonna impact the community. Again, I'm not against it, more power to them, it's their land, go ahead and develop it. But I think as a town, we need to look comprehensively at how it's gonna impact all those different inputs and make sure we have a plan to address that and not leave it up to the fire department to do their own thing and the school board to do their own thing and so on and so forth. So that's my input there. I think you guys should look comprehensive at how that's going to impact the community and how you get out in front of it.
Thank you very much. Sir, did you have a chance to write down? We can bring you up if you'd like right now.
Sure.
All right, and if you could state your name and address as well. Thank you.
I'm David Luck. I live at 100 Vine Street in Berthoud. And I had trouble getting in on the Zoom for the Planning Commission, so I may have missed the first part of it. But I would just like to also kind of, as the gentleman just said, to step back and take a look at this. First of all, the word I want to leave with you is sustainability. And here we have a project that's going to develop over maybe 10 years plus, and I see no plan for sustainability in this project. Simple as fact, what about the bluegrass lawns? Here we have a program in the town to remove lawns, and we pay for it. And yet we're going to allow all this development to have put in bluegrass. Makes no sense to me. I think this is a historic moment for you guys to step back and say we need to change the parameters. The Planning Commission was frustrated because they said that the developer had met all the parameters. So then I'm suggesting the parameters are not correct. We need to think sustainability, geothermic heat and cooling, no gas lines in a community, no bluegrass, as I already mentioned, proper insulation, just to mention a few things. We don't have that in place that I know of. I tried to read the new building codes that were just passed. I couldn't see that that was in there. So the developer also mentioned that this was a much better deal to develop this whole huge thing in one suggestion, rather than have the owner or whoever divided up into smaller plots over a period of time, and I think that he's wrong in that. I think developing smaller plots a little bit at a time would give us a chance to catch up with what we need to catch up with. Maybe there'll be new building codes, maybe there'll new building ideas. Over 10 years, that's a long stretch. So I'm just suggesting that that's not. I think that's mostly what I have to say. I'd like to leave the word sustainability with you. I think we should step back and build sustainably.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone here else regarding the Ludlow? You didn't have a chance to sign up? Okay, so if you have anything written and you'd like to submit it since you'll be gone, you can submit it to the clerk and we'll include it as part of the written record in the packet. Thank you for coming out tonight. Next, Eric Rypluski. Sorry if I butchered that.
Close enough. Thank you, Mayor Karsbeck and town trustees for allowing me to speak tonight.
I'll complete your name and address.
Oh, sorry,
Or your
Eric
business address.
Rypluski, I'm the president of Hilltop Broadband. We're at 115 Turner Avenue here in Berthoud. Just recently saw some notes in the newspaper about the fact that Allo had maybe not come to an agreement with either the town of Berthoud or the four towns to build broadband in the town limits. So I wanted to come up and just introduce ourselves to the trustees and for the public in general, let everybody know what we've been working on and what we can do for the town going forward. So just some key items that I brought with me to outline what Hilltop is. We were founded in 2013. We currently serve about 3,000 customers. We were granted about $1.2 million by the state DOLA Broadband Fund to build fiber to every premise in Platteville. That construction is about 75% complete, and we'll be turning on customers here in the next 4 weeks or so out in Platteville. In the end, that project's going to serve over 1,100 homes and businesses, and that is a complete fiber to the home project. Every premise, every home, every business will have access to a fiber optic connection, whereas previously out in Platteville, they only had a DSL connection. There's not even cable in that town. We've also were engaged in a public-private partnership with Custer County, Silver Cliff, and West Cliff in the southern central part of the state. We signed an agreement with them. It's a $28 million project that we're working on down there. And we've just recently been awarded the first Broadband Ready Community certification by the state of Colorado's Broadband Office. That's to be awarded to us this coming Broadband Summit that they're hosting in Westminster on April 19th. Closer to home here, we've connected over 350 homes west of Berthoud to our fiber system. This includes neighborhoods of Rainbow Lake Estates, Legacy Heights, Longs Peak Farm, the Preserve at Lone Tree, Paradise Valley Estates, and Soaring Peaks Ranch. As part of that project, we also connected a key anchor institution, which is the Berthoud Fire Station number 2. And they're connected now to a fiber optic source versus the wireless choices was the only choice they had in the past. We've also connected the Berthoud Recreation Center to fiber in June of 2021. And we are right now the existing phone carrier for the Recreation Center, the Parks Department, and the Public Works Department. Berthoud Public Works is also served from one of our towers. We use the water tower as a repeating site, and as part of that agreement, we have a dedicated high-capacity system that feeds them with services that weren't available otherwise in that area where the water plant is. We also connect the Berthoud Parks office because, believe it or not, there's actually no service available for them either. So we connect the Berthoud Parks office to our wireless system. We also offer and maintain free Wi-Fi in Fickle and Berthoud Town Parks. This was an agreement we came to with the Chamber of Commerce years ago. We still maintain those, and anytime there's events in those parks where we have that system, we're able to modify the network and fire up new wireless networks for the vendors to use out there and for the Chamber of Commerce as well. In addition to all of those services, we have other communities we serve. We serve out in Tinmouth, we serve out in Greeley, and then right here in Berthoud, it just came to me tonight, I ran some quick numbers on it. We actually serve about 15% of the existing households in Berthoud right now. So that includes the Vantage neighborhood, which obviously is still under construction, so we have a lot of cables in the ground to hit the time limit there.
Mr. Rypluski, we've over the 3 minutes actually. Let's
Sure. All right, I'll close this out just saying we're here, we're in town, we'd love to be able to serve Berthoud's needs. And this would create, if we were building in town, 6 jobs in the construction phase and 3 jobs permanently.
I appreciate it. If you'd like to email the board too from the website, that'd be great.
I'll do do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I request that
Sure.
we consider having them be an agenda item to present all the things less condensed and time constrained to show the board what all they do for Bergen with the services they provide?
Absolutely. Do you want to bring that up under reports when we kind of typically get agenda items on?
Sure.
Thanks, appreciate it. That's a good idea. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak but did not have a chance to sign up under general public comment? All right, thank you for all those who did speak tonight. Before I forget, can we just pass that down to Administrator Kirk? Thanks. Next on our agenda is consent. Trustees like anything removed from consent tonight? Otherwise, is there a motion to approve consent?
I'll move to combine and approve the items on the consent agenda.
All right. Trustee Ayers has moved, Trustee Hardy has seconded. Clerk, may I have a roll call vote, please?
Mayor Pro Tem Grace.
Yes.
Trustee Hardy.
Yes.
Trustee Ayers.
Yes.
Trustee Murphy.
Yes.
Trustee Sorcelli.
Yes.
Trustee Butler.
Yes.
Mayor Carsman.
Yes. All right, next on our agenda is a water rights acquisition of 50 CB2 units, and this will be introduced by Administrator Chris Kirk.
Thank you, Mayor and trustees. We had a long conversation about water last week and kind of mentioned that we may have a purchase to bring to you soon. We've been working on a potential deal for 50 CBT units from a private seller. The purchase price of those units would be $65,000 per unit, which is slightly less than what we paid last year for the same amount of water from a different seller. We think that's indicative of the market, which has cooled a little bit, and so we felt like given that this was a less expensive purchase than last year, and as you know, CBT units are a good solid part of our water portfolio. It's good quality water, it's flexible and easy to use. We felt like this would be an appropriate purchase to move forward with, and would recommend that you authorize us to enter into this agreement for sale and purchase of CBT units, 50 CBT units. The total amount of money would be $3.25 million, or excuse me, $3.23 million. If I did the math right. That's slightly over our 2023 fiscal year budget for water purchases. The water source supply water fund is very healthy, has a little over $30 million in that account. As you know from our meeting last week, we have a lot of water projects planned with that money, and so we obviously don't want to spend it all. Things that we're already underway on, but we feel like this can easily fit within our budget. We'll just need to make a mid-year adjustment when we bring that to you later this year to capture that difference in amount.
All right, thank you, Administrator Kirk.
Pete Johnson, our water attorney, is on Zoom. If you guys have any additional questions, either he or I are happy to answer those.
All right, thank you. Trustees, questions?
I have a
Trustee
minor
Ayers.
question. For clarification from last week, 1,500 was the SFE number, and here it says the possible purchase of 50 would increase that to 1,707, is that correct?
Yeah.
That's not.
No, so the town's total amount of CBT units is 1,138.
Okay,
Just the CBT units alone would serve 1,707 single-family homes.
okay. So how does
So-
this,
One CBT unit is 0.6 acre feet of
Okay,
water,
okay.
which is 1.5 homes per unit.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
yeah,
So this would represent 75 additional single-family equivalents
Okay.
of water.
thank you.
Other questions? So with mine, Administrator Kirk, our cash and lieu is 25, is that correct?
That's correct.
So this in half of 0.6 would be 32,000. We're
So
above our cash and lieu per unit, right?
for this purchase, yes, that's true.
Okay, other questions?
I'd just like to thank staff for bringing this to our attention, especially at a reduced rate. I think it behooves us to move on this item.
All right, I'll open it up to the public now. Is there any in the audience that wishes to speak to this agenda item? Okay, I'll bring it back to the board. Agree with you, Trustee Murphy. It's disappointing that it is above our cash and lieu price, so we're actually paying over. But getting 50 at once is, take what you can get. Anything else? Sounds like we're all in favor. Would anyone like to move on this?
I'll move to approve the agreement for sale and purchase of CBT units and direct staff to allocate additional funds for the purchase in the 2023 annual budget during the mid-year budget adjustment process.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Ooh.
Everybody.
It did sound like Trustee Butler, I think. Did you move? Did you second?
Just
Okay,
say
great.
Jay did it.
Same all did it. Okay, Trustee Murphy has moved on this. Trustee Butler has seconded. Clerk, can we have a roll call vote?
Trustee Hardy,
Yes.
Trustee Murphy,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Grace.
Yes.
Trustee Butler,
Yes.
Trustee Sorcelli,
Yes.
Trustee Ayers,
Yes.
Mayor Karspeck.
Yes. We can move right now to item number 3, which is the sale of the old town hall, and this is a public hearing. And for the folks in the audience, this is a quasi judicial matter here, so we'll have a presenter. We'll open it up to the board for questions. Then we'll open it up to the public for your public testimony. I'll close that then. We'll bring it back to the board for deliberation. So it's very specific here for legal reasons. So we'll start out here with Walt Elish, our Economic Development Director.
Thank you, Mayor. Trustees, this is presented to you last meeting regarding ordinance number 1371, or 1317. And it just positions the town to be able to sell the old town hall site. You're not selling the old town hall site tonight. It's just positioning you to be able, and us, to be able to sell the property for private use, for a mixed-use development down the road. We discussed this last board meeting as to why we should go through this process. And are there any questions? Hope you had a chance to review the ordinance. It's pretty straightforward. Once again, it's not authorizing you to sell the property. It's just positioning the board to be able to sell the property down the road.
When the developer, are you done? Sorry. Now I'm
Yes.
breaking my own rules here. Okay.
No, good.
Questions from the board? So we're positioning ourselves if a developer or when a
Correct.
developer wants to purchase.
Correct.
Okay, and it didn't seem like anything changed from the last meeting? We didn't have any adjustments?
No, nothing's changed. And for those of you who weren't at the last board meeting, maybe just real quickly, we have to show that the property has not been used for public purpose, which it hasn't since 2016. And there's really no intent to use it for public purpose in the future, what there isn't, as far as I know. We want to sell it for a mixed-use development. So to put us in a position to be able to sell that property, we need to pass ordinance 1317.
And just for clarification, public meant government use, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Other questions? All right, at this time, I'll open it up to the public. If there's anyone in the audience that wishes to speak to this agenda item, we'll start with those who signed up. All right, we have no one signed up. Ma'am, if you'd like to come.
I just have
We gotta have you at the front, no matter. Thank you.
Jerry Tracy, 806 4th Street. I just have a question about the property, the building on the property. Is that not the historic building? The old City Hall building?
Whenever you're ready, I can't really interrupt you to have a dialogue, but if you have any other questions before we close
Okay.
it out.
That's my question.
Okay, thanks.
What would happen to the actual building on the property?
Can we answer this, Attorney Smith, in order, or do we have to hear all public comment before we get questions?
I would recommend you take all public comment for this legislative matter.
Okay.
And just to correct the record, it's a legislative matter, not quasi-judicial.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
But let's
I'll have
take
to
all,
learn the difference
let's
here in a
take
bit.
all public comment.
Okay, thank you. We will answer that question. Is there anyone else? All right, Administrator Kirk, do you mind clarifying this?
Sure. The historic portion of the building, there are 3 buildings on site, actually 4 if you count the old shed on the north end, that metal building. There's the feed store, there's the old town hall site, and then there's what is like an old bank building, formerly served as police station. That brick portion on the far western side, we would fully expect that it will be maintained, and that would be part of any purchase agreement we bring to you. That would be required to be kept, even if the other buildings on site that are not historic, like the old town hall that has like the 7-foot tall ceilings and the weird mansard roof and that stuff. We would expect those to be torn down as part of the redevelopment of that site, but the historic portion of that building would be maintained.
Thank you. Okay, we'll close public comment here and bring it back to the board for deliberation. I think I already asked if the board had any questions. How does everyone feel about this? We'll start with trustee Ayers.
No, I think we've had conversations about this. As long as the historic buildings are preserved, I don't see this as a problem, especially since it hasn't been used since 2016.
Thank you. Trustee Hardy.
Ditto.
All right, trustee Butler.
Just to clarify, so when a developer does want to purchase or any buyer, that would come back before us
Yes, it
to
will.
discuss? Okay. That's no.
You'll approve that sale via another ordinance if you choose to do so. And that'll outline the terms of how that'll be done.
Okay.
All right. Okay. Trustee Murphy.
I would just state that the use delineated under this ordinance is, I believe, to be correct for the site. Looking forward into the possible development of it, I just want to make sure from a negotiation standpoint that this is working in the public interest, it's fair, and it also protects the town against any kind of default or failure to meet terms by the person developing. So that's all I've got to say.
Okay, sounds like you're in favor as well.
Yes.
Okay. Trustee Sorcelli?
I'm in favor as well. I just think it's good for the public to understand that we're not just making an agreement to sell a property. This is a part of a procedural part of the process so that we can find the right person in the public setting and make that decision. So I'm in favor.
All right, thank you for that clarification. Mayor Pro Tem Grace?
Makes sense. We've been kicking this can for a while.
Yes, I agree as well. You sound like you're, okay. Thank you for that clarification, trustee Sorcelli. This isn't a kind of a willy-nilly thing. We have a particular idea in mind for that space, and I guess I'm the only one here that's been here with Walt since 2016 when that property was first considered, so long time coming, and thank you. I'm also in favor. Would anyone like to move on this?
I move to approve ordinance 1317, an ordinance of the town of Berthoud, Colorado regarding uses of the property located at 328 Massachusetts Avenue, Berthoud, Colorado.
I'll second.
All right, Mayor Pro Tem Grace has moved on this. Trustee Hardy has seconded. Is there any final discussion? Amendments? All right, clerk, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Trustee Sorcelli,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Grace.
Yes.
Trustee Murphy,
Yes.
Trustee Ayers,
Yes.
Trustee Butler,
Yes.
Trustee Hardy,
Yes.
Mayor Horsback.
Yes. Okay, we are cruising here. We can move on now to Ludlow Neighborhood Master Plan, and this is, and rezoning, excuse me. We have our new town planner, Ann Johnson, here to present on this, and this is a hearing continuance. And I'll just read this again. Hearing is expected to be continued to April 25th, 2023. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Karspeck and members of the Board of Trustees. So you said everything that is going to be on this next slide, if I can figure out how to advance it. Yes, the applicant has requested a continuance to the April 25th hearing in order for them to have a community open house and to address some of the items that they heard during public testimony at the Planning Commission meeting. So it's at their request, and that concludes the presentation.
Okay, thank you. And trustees, any questions regarding this? We did already have public comment on this, kind of a one-off matter, just because it is kind of a unique thing.
Just for reference, trustees would not be allowed to attend that open house, correct?
Do you hear that?
Yeah, that is correct. Trustees should not attend the open house.
Okay, because it is a
And you
public
can
hearing.
confirm with the attorney, yeah.
Just we had the situation.
Just to be very clear here, we can't attend the public house,
Yes, you
Okay.
cannot attend the public
open house.
open house.
Any other questions for Planner Johnson? Okay, we already heard public comment on this. I guess we'll just go for a motion here. Does anyone like to move on this?
I'll go.
All right.
Let's see, make sure I get on the right line here. May move to approve the applicant's request to continue the public hearing to consider a change of zoning to neighborhood master plan on March 28th, 2023 to April 25th, 2023.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
That trustee Murphy. Okay, we have a motion by trustee Hardy, seconded by trustee Murphy. Clerk, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Mayor Pro Tem Grace,
Yes.
Trustee Hardy,
Yes.
Trustee Ayers,
Yes.
Trustee Murphy,
Yes.
Trustee Saraceli?
Yes.
Trustee Butler?
Yes.
Mayor Karspeck?
Yes. Okay. We can move on now to Harvest West Annexation Substantial Compliance, again by Planner Johnson.
Right, thank you, Mayor Karspeck, members of the Board of Trustees. So this evening, we are just hearing the consideration of setting the date for the public hearings. This meeting tonight establishes two things. One, did they meet their contiguity requirements, which means more than 1/6 of the property perimeter has to be touching the current boundaries of the town of Berthoud. And two, is there interest between the applicant and the town to consider annexation? So those are the only things that are being considered tonight. Everything else will be considered during a public hearing if you choose to set that public hearing date. So just for those members of the audience that might not be familiar with the planning process, it really is, for annexation, it's a 4-step process. The processes are on the slide. There's a pre-application process. A lot of information is given to an applicant before they even submit their application to make sure, that maybe there's a drainage issue or a light rail station or something that is in the area that they need to consider with their application. Then the second step is they are submitting their application. This is when staff receives the application, we make sure it is complete, and then referrals are notified, comments are received. We provide any staff comments to the applicant to address, and then we schedule public notice and hearings. The third step is where we are this evening, just for hearing again, is there an interest and did they meet contiguity? Then post-approval actions, again, will be public notice, referral review, special district notification, and the applicant notifies the mineral estate, and then we enter into an annexation agreement to present to you all on what their obligations are and if there are any obligations of the town, and then we have public hearings. So again, this is where we are this evening, and this is just for staff to confirm that the requirements of the Land Use Code and Colorado Revised Statute have been met. Staff has worked with the with Attorney Smith, and we are presenting a positive report to you all that those statutory requirements have been met. So tonight, again, we will have a very brief staff presentation. Mayor Karspeck can open it up to public comment, and then there will be discussion and decision this evening. So for the adequacy review, again, the parcel that is highlighted in blue on your screen is the parcel that we're considering for potential annexation into the town. Tonight, you don't annex, you just say, we're interested and here's the date when we're gonna hear the details of the application. So it is south of and adjacent to land that's already been annexed into the town of Berthoud. It is west of and adjacent to Harvest Ridge subdivision. And I don't need to talk about any of those details. So as you can see, it is contiguous by almost half, which exceeds 1/6. And then in the municipal code section, again, the resolution of substantial compliance is in your packet, and the hearing date could be on May 25th, which is more than 30 days after this date, but less than 60 days, which is also a statutory requirement for annexations. And I believe that might be it. Let me double check here. Yes, that is it. So that concludes staff's presentation on setting the hearing date and accepting the petition.
Thank you, Planner Johnson.
You're welcome.
Trustees, any questions?
I have a question.
Okay, Trustee Ayers?
Based on, I guess, the averages of the local area, how many homes would such an annexation produce in the future if someone were to develop it?
It depends on what the zoning is going to be. There could be anywhere from 8 to, I believe, 20 units per acre, but it depends on that zoning, and we're not here to talk about zoning tonight. We're just here to talk about, is there an interest for development?
So follow-up question, making sure that it's not on here, how many acres is the property?
It's roughly 35. It might be 34.49.
Okay.
But right around that 35 acre.
And you said 8 to 20?
8 to 20 could be the maximum.
Thank you.
Other questions?
And I'm not quite sure if this is gonna fall in the same line of questioning. Will this property have access to 287 and CDOT capabilities of getting in and out, or is that kind of past the scope of what we're talking about now?
Yep, that will all be covered with the future development. Tonight, we're just determining, does this meet the statutory requirements? And is there an interest in the town in considering the petition, considering the annexation zoning and a neighborhood master plan that will be heard at a public hearing?
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? So my questions, Planner Johnson, are this community of interest, I believe it's called, or interest exists. I've heard it one way is if the board has any actual interest in annexing anymore, and I've also heard it, is it part of the comprehensive plan? One or the other or both, could we get an answer on what that is?
Yes, so it is part of the comprehensive plan and it was designated as potential for urban scale development on the comprehensive plan. And it is within our urban growth boundary area.
So tonight's, is it, question is if the board wants to annex it, or is that kind of a foregone thing since it's in the, in our planning documents?
The question can be, is there an interest by the town trustees in annexing this particular property? It is in your comprehensive plan. What they are going to be proposing is in alignment with the comprehensive plan, future land use map. And it is contiguous by more than 1/6 perimeter, which are the main requirements for setting a hearing date for you to consider all the details of the proposal.
Thank you. Follow up for Attorney Smith. Once, if this were to be approved tonight, and we heard the details at the actual hearing, and it's kind of more than we bargained for, is there an opportunity then to pull out, or?
Absolutely.
Okay.
The answer is yes.
Okay.
This does not do anything other than check a box. State statute says that the board does what usually an administrative staff would do on a thing like this. The board says all the boxes are checked in the statute for what the petitioner was to allege in his petition. And what you will do is you will test those allegations in a public hearing. And you will get to decide in your complete discretion, because that's what annexation statutes do in Colorado. They allow you to decide in your complete discretion on whether you will annex or not annex. It's a legislative matter.
Thank you very much.
And if I may, Mayor Perspeck?
Please.
Just so you all know, as trustees, there will be an annexation agreement that will be presented with the next phase of hearings. And in that annexation agreement, there will be obligations that the developer will need to make in order to satisfy the comprehensive plan, the land use code, utility provision, all of that. So that agreement will be entered into between you and the developer should you choose to proceed with this activity. But there will be very clearly spelled out what the obligations are.
Thank you. I'm just gonna keep going. I'm just curious here. If we were to say no tonight, does that preclude the applicant from ever coming back?
No, it does not preclude them from ever coming back.
So they could just apply again down the road? Okay.
I believe there may be a time frame involved in that, and I can check that, but they're not precluded in perpetuity from coming back.
I have no more questions. Any other questions? Okay, thank you. I could open this up to public comment, is that correct?
It doesn't require public comment. It's really in the nature of sort of an administrative decision, but you certainly can, and that's your prerogative.
Okay, well, I don't wanna call it a mistake, but I did tell the board, I'll open everything up to or the audience, I'll open everything up to public comment. So if there is anyone here tonight that wishes to speak to this, setting the hearing, please come to the front, and if you can state your name and address. If you can come to the front and state your name and address, and then we won't be able to answer till afterwards. But, go ahead.
Hi, my name's Bella Strand. I live at 715 Welch Avenue. And so I guess just one of my questions is what happens if it isn't considered right now? And then I also just wanted to ask, just from what I've heard from our community members, both here and on social media and in person, is it appropriate to consider another development at this time in the midst of bringing in a development that could potentially raise the town's population by 30 to 50% when we need to consider a more grand scheme of things?
Thank
And
you,
so
Bella.
That's my question. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, no, you're fine. That was it.
Okay, any other questions? Or I'm sorry, would anyone else wish to speak? All right, I'll close the public hearing, bring it back to the board. Administrator Kirk, do you mind answering that first one? Will anything change if we don't, I mean, we're setting a date, right?
I'm sorry,
Nothing would change between now and then, right?
between now and the annexation
Right.
hearing?
Right.
In what way?
I think that was,
You mean the annexation application itself?
right. I mean,
I wouldn't expect it to,
right, we couldn't do any code updates or anything.
no.
Thank you. The second one, I think, is a matter of just opinion on your part. I don't think we can really answer that. So I brought it, I guess it's back to the board here. Any deliberation, any thoughts? Go ahead, trustee
Yeah.
Ayers.
I think based on staff's report, there's no negative fiscal impact for having a public hearing. I would like to hear from other members of the community, especially based on the comment that was here tonight. Obviously, people are concerned about growth as it stands. However, I don't think that it's a bad idea to always have public input for this kind of decision.
Sure, thank you, trustee Ayers. Any other thoughts? I just have one question, Administrator Kirk, and sorry I didn't ask this earlier, but regarding this proposed state legislation, and I think we're all kind of struggling to read through it right now with density. Do you have any particular ideas how that might affect any annexation?
I don't think it will have an impact on the annexation itself. It may have ultimate impacts on the land uses that get developed there, but I don't think it'll have any impact on annexations themselves.
I just have a quick comment.
Trustee Sorcelli.
I've just observed over the years, I know this is just a procedural opportunity, but as far as annexations, anytime the board can review opportunity to annex, it's always a good thing. Because it gives us the ability to say we want oversight or control or ability to collaborate on a piece of property. And I've always seen that work in our favor in the town's
Thank you.
favor, so I'm a fan of that.
Good thoughts. Well, I'm concerned here with what the state has to say on this, but Administrator Kirk, you make me feel better, and I do share your concerns, Bella. So it will be good to hear from other members of the community on this.
Yep.
All right, is there anyone wishes to move on this?
I'll make the motion to move to approve resolution 2023-05, a resolution of the town of Berthoud, Colorado regarding petition for annexation filed by HT Land Partners LLC, accepting such petition as being substantially compliant with CRS 31-12-107 and 31-12-108, as well as sections 30-8-103 and 30-8-104 of the Berthoud Municipal Code, and setting May 23rd, 2023 as a public hearing date to evaluate the annexation, change of zone, and the neighborhood master plan.
Okay, trustee Butler is moving on this. Trustee Murphy has seconded. Clerk, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Trustee Sorcelli?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Grace?
Yes.
Trustee Ayers?
Yes.
Trustee Hardy?
Yes.
Trustee Murphy?
Yes.
Trustee Butler?
Yes.
Mayor Karsbeck?
Yes. Okay. All right, we'll move on now to Heron Lake's 17th filing. This will be a preliminary plat. This is also a public hearing, correct? Just wanted, the last public hearing was off, so this is also one. Okay, great. Okay, this is also a public hearing, and we have Planner Johnson back on here. Welcome.
Right, Mayor Karsbeck, members of the Town Board of Trustees. So this evening, we are going to have a public hearing regarding Heron Lake 17th filing. Again, for those in the audience that might not be familiar with the land use planning and public hearing process, I'm put this screen up. This is a slight duplication of what we heard during the annexation hearing. I'm not going to go into details about this cycle since we've already discussed it this evening. But we are here in the public hearing meeting stage. There are 4 stages of discussion tonight, and you had opened up the one public hearing with setting the tone for what the expectations are, Mayor Karspek, staff presentation, the applicant's presentation, the public hearing open for public testimony, and then discussion and voting by the town board of trustees. So at this point in time, I'm actually going to turn it over to Will from Baseline, and they are going to be giving a presentation, a formal presentation about the application process itself and review. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Evening board. Yep, so I'll just go ahead and go through a brief presentation on the project.
Look, could we also get your name and business address? Do you know it by
Oh.
chance?
Sorry?
Do you know your business address by chance? Clerk, do we need this for a presenter? For an applicant?
Just name is perfect.
Just your name, okay. Can you say that real quick?
It's Will Charles Baseline and 1200 North Ruby Golden,
Oh, you got it, okay, great.
There you go. Yeah, so going into the project, as you can tell from the name, this is part of the Heron Lake subdivision. This is their 17th filing for this project. The applicant being Three Lakes Development, with the property being between that County Road 14 and Heron Lakes Parkway. County Road 14 being that road just on the top of that red rectangle shape on this picture. As far as the current zoning, it is mostly R2 for the portion being developed with a just slight fragments of that ag that will, as mentioned in the staff report, will need to be rezoned during that final plat process to be that R2 zone district. As far as size, as you can kind of see from this picture, the golf course is highlighted in that blue. So the overall project, because those little portions of ag are in this development, it's 128 acres. However, the only portion that has any proposed development on it is that red shape to the side. So nothing's proposed in any of that blue. It's just there's fragments of that parcel that end up in this as far as how it's reviewed. And then again, so the applicant tonight is requesting that preliminary plat. So just to give a picture of what the plat looks like, this is it. So that 132 lots would be on that northeast portion of the site, and then that larger golf course tract is that, a majority of the development to that west and south. Then again, this is just a visual of those 2 zone districts. You can see there's kind of slivers of that ag that would be rezoned in that next process if this is approved tonight, and then majority of it being that R2. Getting into the criteria for preliminary plats, there are 7 of them that need to be met for approval. The first one is a functional system of land. For that one, as mentioned, this property is zoned that R2. Your future land use map calls this area out for suburban residential. And then this is also consistent with what was provided in their concept plans during those earlier stages of the subdivision process. Number 2 is that concept plan. Again, it's the precursor to these neighborhood master plans that you're seeing these days. But in the grand scheme, they're similar as far as their intent. And so this property does conform with that concept plan. Third one being comprehensive plan, port plan. As mentioned, there's that future land use map, which does call this out as suburban residential, which is one of those new zone districts that you guys have, but it's fairly consistent and has parameters that allow for development similar to what's in this R2. The next one is the utility and transportation design is adequate. So this one, they do meet those utility requirements. As far as transportation, there was discussion and a waiver request that was heard before Planning Commission. The waiver request was denied, but Planning Commission decided instead of doing a waiver to include a portion about County Road 14 and the future build out of it as part of the conditions of approval for the preliminary plat. And I'll kind of get into their wording on the next slide, but there is that portion of discussion. The fifth one being negative impacts on adjacent land uses. This property is very similar to what is on the surrounding properties. It's all, the portions that are developed are parts of the Heron Lakes subdivision, so similar are to zoning. The next is need or desirability within the community. Again, this was has a previously approved concept plan as well. Portions of this property were annexed last year into the city to allow for some of this development on the further eastern sides of it. And it again conforms to that future land use map in the comprehensive plan. And then the last one is how the applicant addressing public comments. All public comments were provided to the applicant, and they were provided to Planning Commission as well as yourselves. The only exception to that being one that came in last Friday, which I'll go ahead and hand out real quick. If you don't mind, I'll hand them to you and do a pass down the line. And that one, just for the record, is from Mr. David Murray. So staff did find that they addressed these comments, but if there are any additional, the applicant is here as well if you have any questions. So getting on to the recommended action, as I mentioned, there was that waiver request that was heard on March 9th before the Planning Commission. This was to not construct the curb and gutter along County Road 14. If you've driven down that County Road 14, there's portions basically at Heron Point and then a large gap and then this property. So as far as Lucas standards, they call for this to be that curb and gutter road. The applicant requested that waiver to defer that. And so that's where these conditions that are on the screen now kind of came in from that Planning Commission discussion, which is to include those curb and gutter on their plans, but then not construct until a later date where a full connection to that Heron Point portion to the east. And then the only other additional condition which was recommended by the staff is that the applicant should apply for and receive a rezoning prior to approval of that final plat. I know that was a lot of words, but I'm happy to answer any questions you have, and I believe the applicant also has a presentation.
Any questions specifically right now?
The last piece you brought up, they wouldn't need to make that connection until later.
Correct.
What later's kind of broad. Is there a better timetable we're looking at?
So, so the way the condition is written is that they would make those improvements when adjacent properties develop. So there's one unannexed property in between. In your packet as well, there's a letter from the town engineer as far as their thoughts on this curb and gutter and deferring it, and I'll let his words speak for himself. And if anyone wants me, I can read what those are. But Yeah, so it would be when those portions to the east develop, which is between Heron Point and Heron Lakes.
Okay, 'cause I'm just making sure, because in the past, we've also, trusted developers to kind of handle this, but it turns out that those are the last ones to get developed. And it could be years for this project to get built out.
Right.
They're still not doing anything wrong, but the
Yeah.
improvement that we're looking to have done, yes, it's pulling a Band-Aid off, but when you kick the can down the road like that, it's frustrating on our end. So having been told we'll handle it later, I would like a little bit more of a, we'll handle it by this much completion of project, not.
For clarity, we recommend you not approve that waiver request.
Right.
So it would have to do it right away.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
That answered my question.
Other questions for Will?
I have
Go ahead, please, Trustee Harris.
How far is the gap from the unannexed properties, give or take?
I pulled it up, I don't have a distance for you, but I pulled it up on this plan. So Heron Point is those homes you see, just tucked in on the east.
So there is sidewalk and improvements with that neighborhood to the right.
Right,
so it
and
would
and this
only be-
doesn't absolve them from doing a sidewalk,
Right.
it would be that curb and gutter,
Just the curb and gutter.
as written from the planning commission recommendation.
That was gonna be so the sidewalk is gonna happen.
Correct.
Absolve, okay, thanks.
And if I may make a point of clarification from staff's perspective, Mayor Karspec. So in your packets, there is a proposed motion that is provided, and one is the motion to support Planning Commission's recommendation for the deferred installation. And the second item is what staff and the town engineer is recommending, is requiring it to be part of this particular development, going ahead and putting it in right away. So I just wanted to make that point of clarification, that you do have those two motion options to consider this evening.
Thank you. Okay, so you had more?
I have a follow-up question.
Yes, please.
And I don't know whom to address this to. Are there any, I guess, from looking at other construction projects in the past, are there any negative outcomes for constructing improvements with gaps in them versus waiting until everything is complete to construct it?
I think the simple answer to that is yes, there can be. There can be challenges with drainage, there could be, I've seen areas where a portion of infrastructure was completed and there were gaps on either side, and that infrastructure fell apart long before those gaps were ever filled. That sat for 15 or 20 years. Some of that may be dictated by how soon the board wants to prioritize building curb, gutter, and sidewalk through that county stretch. It's one property, I measured on Google Earth, it's a little over 600 feet. But what I do, from my perspective, and this is my opinion, you guys are welcome to disagree with, but deferring improvements also comes with a large set of risks, including that they never get built.
So,
Or that the town ends up building them someday, because
right.
who knows when that property will develop.
So a clarification of what you just said, it is within the town's purview to complete that 600-foot section.
I believe we already annexed the right-of-way, and so we have existing right-of-way. I don't believe there's enough right-of-way for us to build all of those improvements in their ultimate location. We would have to go acquire more from the adjacent property owner, I believe.
Thank you.
I don't have anything else, just here, kind of questions.
Great, thank you. Other questions for staff, Will, before the applicant comes up?
Is there a regional trail in that area? I seem to remember that being a thing.
I thought that scooted over the Front Range Trail connection to Lovell.
Front Range Trail is farther to the west,
Okay, so it's not in that area at all.
not in that particular stretch.
Okay.
I think we're good, if the applicant would like to come forward. Thank you.
Michelle, do you have that on your screen. Just a moment, please.
While he's pulling that up, I don't know if you guys have had a chance to see the Rock the Block television show that's on HGTV. It's set at Heron Lakes. This is their 4th season, and so if you get a chance, week 4 episode was on last night. It's every Monday for 6 weeks, and I think they've had 17 million views so far, and it's a pretty amazing showcase of the town of Berthoud and our region. So we thought it was sort of interesting to have them, you know, a bunch of Hollywood folks here shooting a television show in Berthoud. So if you get a chance to check it out, if you have Amazon Prime, the last week and the previous week's episodes are on Amazon Prime, so you can get caught up, and then we have watch parties up at the clubhouse if you want to come up and watch with the
I have family members that have no interest in home improvement that are so excited about this. And congratulations to Tyson Heineke, who I went to school with and did all the moving for that show.
Yeah, it was a whirlwind, and you know, sorry to steal your time, but I can't help myself. You know, you think about that, and it's like, did they really get all that work done in 6 weeks? And they did. It was pretty amazing. I think at one point they said there was 470 people working on those homes all at one time. So it was pretty amazing. So my name is Jim Birdsall. I represent the ownership group of Heron Lakes and 3 Lakes Development. What's in front of you tonight is the 17th filing. I have been in front of all of you before, obviously in front of this board as a body a number of times as we've worked through the various filings and phases of the project. So we're really pleased to be here in front of you tonight. We think this is a very nice addition to the neighborhood, compatible with the surrounding neighborhood, including the county properties to the east, and have worked for the last 2.5 years or so with staff to address comments and concerns. Obviously, we have one issue to talk about tonight relative to the curb and gutter, but I did have just one clarification to Will's presentation.
Can I interrupt you real quick, Mr. Birdsall? Can I get the name of your business address, please?
444 Mountain Avenue here in Berthoud.
Appreciate it.
So prior to Will's time, we actually did come in front of you guys with a neighborhood master plan per your code and got that approved. So what's approved is consistent with the concept plan as we'll describe, but we also have an approved neighborhood master plan that is consistent with. In fact, the only changes between that plan and this plan are to address the conditions that were approved with that plan. Happy to address any questions you might have about the specifics of the neighborhood or the layout, but thought I would just touch base on the request for not doing curb and gutter. And I've been doing a little bit of research, and I don't know if it's possible for staff to pull up a section of the development code. It's figure 3.7 in the development code.
It's appropriate, right?
So the reason I was hoping to bring that up is it's really for us a discussion of what that road wants to be long-term, not just for us, but for the town. If you guys decide you want us to do curb and gutter, we absolutely will. We're not opposed to doing it, but we think it's a mistake. Not just for us, but for the town. That road, you know, both east of us and west of us, will never develop further than it is, other than possibly the lot to our east might develop into a couple of additional homes. But all the properties to the north and to the west of us are effectively fully developed. And those open spaces that you see there are all rural in character and governed by conservation easements. So there's not the ability to do additional neighborhoods or additional subdivisions. And so the section of code that I'm hoping we can pull up is a rural sort of design for the rural residential district, and it shows a sketch of a road that is exactly like this road. So it has borrow ditches on either side. It's got a bike lane. It has optional sidewalks in the sketch, but we will do sidewalks. And it's very rural in character. And if you can visualize the edge of your community in any direction, at some point, you're gonna get to the edge of urban development and you transition to a rural road. And what we're suggesting is that this is the spot to do it. Where Heron Point, which is significantly denser than us, ends, and you drive west on County Road 14, you hit, borrow ditches, rail fences, rural properties, and big conservation easement properties. And then when you get to our project, you have, there, perfect. So in my mind, that sketch is exactly what our road section looks like today and what we're hoping to keep it looking like long term. And if you can imagine, further west, you have the Jaskowski property, which is an open space property that the town owns. I mean, to me, the road in front of that property should be rural too. So that's all we're suggesting is, we're very close to this. We spend a lot of time looking at this, and we think that that's the right point to transition from an urban road section to a rural road section. So that's what we're hoping to achieve. And what we worked out with Planning Commission was, if we're wrong, and our premise is wrong and ends up being urbanized and the town decides, hey, we want to add curb and gutter on this section of road, then we would participate and pay for that section of curb or install that section of curb in front of our project and do our part. But I don't think that's gonna happen. I don't think the town is gonna wanna do curb and gutter out there. And I just have one other comment, which is, when you require infrastructure like this, it's a one-time thing for us, right? We'll put it in and then we get through our warranty period and then we hand it over to the town. But that infrastructure is then something that the town has to maintain forever. And so I think the town should be real thoughtful about where they do, urban infrastructure that they then have to maintain when it may or may not be necessary. So with that, I'm happy to address any questions or comments you might have.
Thank you. Mr. Birdsall, any questions for the applicant?
Is that illustration showing a curve, or is that a painted line where the bicycle is separated from the lane?
That's a painted line in the illustration.
Would this be curb, gutter, and tree lawn, is that part of it?
You mentioned you think it's gonna be a mistake. Specifically, why do you think that?
Well, to me, it's an aesthetic, right? To me, an urban street has a totally different aesthetic than a rural street. And that's what we're hoping to achieve is it's gonna be rural on the north side of the road forever, unless the town just decides to put curb there for some reason. Because there's no development allowed on the north. Every one of those properties is fully developed or in a conservation easement. So on the north side of the road, it will never have curb and gutter. And on the south side of the road, the only section that could be curb and gutter, in my opinion, is the part in front of us and maybe the gap. But to me, that seems strange to drive down a street that has curb and gutter on one side and not on the other side. And to me, the rural character where you drive down a rural road and it goes into a swale on the sides with tree plantings, and then you have a detached sidewalk, and then a rail fence, and then you have open space to your neighborhood, has a different feel than like a Heron Point or a Vantage or Prairie Star or some of these other more urbanized projects. So to me, it's just a kind of a character decision, and that's why I think it would. And when I say a mistake, I mean it's not the end of the world, but I think aesthetically it would seem strange to be driving down a rural road and see a patch of curb on one side of the road, sort of standing on its own. That to me just seems out of place, and sort of out of character with the front of our project. And this, for us, this is not a big deal. If you guys say, no, do the curb, we'll do it, and it's fine. But, this conversation for us goes back 15 years, a desire to be very rural. We had a lot of restrictions on the amount of residential that we could have on the north side of our project. We were, intentionally feathered it, and that's why the golf course sort of is designed the way it does. So as we go to the north, you have less houses that are sort of fronting on that road. So, there were a lot of requests made of us over the years to be rural. And so it kind of seems a little bit strange for us now to be arguing for rural when it was sort of told to us, no, you will be rural, on that side. So that's why we're making the request. As you guys know, we don't sort of ask for variances or ask for these sorts of things very often. I mean, the only reason we're doing it is because we feel like it's the right thing to ask for, so.
So point of order,
Yes.
and I respect what Mr. Birdsall is saying, but I've taken a look at the Berthoud Development Code, and the body that has jurisdiction to consider a waiver is the Planning Commission.
Not the board.
Right. So the Planning Commission correctly heard the request for the waiver and denied it. So at this point, we're bound by the determination of the Planning Commission on the denial. What the Board of Trustees can consider, and I understand what Mr. Birdsall is arguing for, what the Board of Trustees can consider is whether to adopt in your ultimate decision Planning Commission's condition or not. So you either get a thumbs up to that condition or a thumbs down to that condition. But it would not be appropriate to reconsider the request for the waiver because you don't have jurisdiction to do that.
So that vote at the very end would kind of be the same thing as what we're doing right now, thumbs up or thumbs down.
I think that's what Attorney Smith is suggesting, that you can approve the planning commission's recommendation to defer the improvements, but not to waive them if the planning commission already waived or already denied the waiver. Does that make sense?
Okay.
So you can make the recommendation, or you can agree with their recommendation to defer those improvements until such time as the adjacent properties develop, and that curb gutter's put in. But not to waive the requirement to put in curb and gutter.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Restate that already, I didn't mean to.
Let's go back to.
Would it go back to planning commission? What happens if we deny it, if we don't approve, if we don't agree with the planning commission, we deny it, then what happens?
If you don't approve the deferral, then they'll be required to build curb and gutter.
Just like the code, yeah.
Set aside the waiver. All you're looking at, and the same thing that the Planning Commission looked at separately, was this plat. And what they.
I do have a question on the road though. That's the county's road, correct? It's not the town's road.
It's the town's road. I misspoke earlier when I said that portion of road, it's hard to explain. We have annexed all of the roadway from Berthoud Parkway to the edge of the Jaskowski property, with the exception of a small portion in front of that county piece. We have an agreement with the county where we maintain it, but it's technically not owned by the town at this point. And so.
So we have both the north curb and the south curb as town property.
All of the right of way along County Road 14, with the exception of that stretch by that county property, has been annexed by the town.
So even though the properties on the north have conservation easements, that doesn't come into the right of way of the road where we want to put curb and sidewalk if we chose to on the north side.
I would assume that is correct. I haven't done an exhaustive
would
legal
probably-
review, but if we control the right of way, then we have the right to build improvements within that right of way that are sufficient for.
It's just another point of order, just to bring us back. I don't think we're done. Do you have any else to present on?
Nope.
Okay, now let's ask questions. Great.
Okay. So I was just trying to figure out, because he said the north side's got conservation easements and we'd never be able to build over there, but to me, that doesn't sound like that would be the case because they don't own the road, we do, and we have the easements to build on the curb.
You could choose to
need to
build a
widen
full
the
cross-section of the roadway within the existing right of way, including curb gutter and sidewalk if you wanted to do that on the north side.
North side of Heron Point, do they have a sidewalk?
They do.
Okay.
And curb and gutter.
And curb and gutter.
Could we get I guess a Google map of kind of the area we're talking about, of exactly where the sidewalk and curb kind of ends? And I guess realistic is a static image right now in the packet. It tells the story, but it kind of just doesn't encapsulate
Can
it.
you see a map with yellow lines on it on your screen?
Yeah, we saw that. Yeah,
Okay.
I think Trustee.
You want to see an
Mayor
aerial
Pro Tem
photo?
Grace is pretty.
Yeah, this is an aerial photo that I have up here on my screen. I don't know if you can see the same thing that I see.
Oh, now we see it. I don't think we saw it before. Maybe we did.
So this is an exhibit that we put together. The yellow lines are where there is curb.
Right.
And that's it.
No sidewalk.
There are sidewalks where there's yellow lines.
north side, where's the
And again, for
sidewalk
clarity, Mr. Birdsall's not requesting to defer the sidewalk improvement, only the curb and gutter.
And then on the north side, how far does curb and gutter go?
There is no
There is no curb and gutter on
the
the north side.
Even on that neighborhood just south of Carrie Martin?
That's in the count, or it's either in the city of Ludlow or in the county. I'm actually not sure I know the answer, but it's not in the town's jurisdiction.
So the only side that's been finished is our south side.
Correct.
If I might, there was a question earlier about the Front Range Trail. The 17th filing does include the Front Range Trail. I think the question was specific to, is there any of the Front Range Trail adjacent to County Road 14 as part of this project? And that is not the case. So the trail would connect through 17th filing, and then it parallels our maintenance building along County Road 14 and then crosses at the intersection of Heron Lakes Parkway and County Road 14. That's where it will cross and connect to the City of Loveland Trail.
So it'll connect to the west, but is that what you're saying?
Yes, and then to Administrator Kirk's point, we've agreed to extend sidewalk along County Road 14 and partner with the town for that gap property that's in the county to provide sidewalk there. So we would provide a sidewalk connection from Heron Point to Heron Lakes, which would then connect to the Colorado Front Range Trail going north and south. So that connection would be made. So somebody from Heron Point would be able to get to the Colorado Front Range Trail.
So you're saying where the sidewalk ends here, just to the east of you, you go across that private property, that section there, all the way over to Heron Point or Heron Lake Parkway?
Yep.
The sidewalk?
Yep, correct.
Pending the approval of that property owner to say, yeah, you can build a sidewalk on that property.
Well, our engineers think there's room in the right of way to do it.
Since we own the land, or we take control of the street, we can do that. In the existing right of way. Okay,
So in a way, he's asking for a waiver on curb and gutter, but he'll build a sidewalk on property that's not his. No, so how I'm seeing it.
and his.
But there is no room for curb and gutter improvements and a sidewalk on that private property.
I haven't said that I'm not saying there isn't. I don't know that we fully evaluated it. There is some existing fencing where it gets really narrow, and so can we maintain a tree lawn and curb gutter and sidewalk? I haven't looked at it. If Mr. Birdsall and his team have, then maybe I'm wrong. But it narrows kind of on the west end where there's some fencing, and I guess it ultimately depends on what the final alignment of the roadway is.
I almost kind of feel like we need more information on where our right of way is and kind of get some better details on what can be built and when, in my opinion. I mean,
We can wait on that one.
Well, based on the maps that my, or Public Works Operations Manager provided me just a couple weeks ago, actually about a separate issue. We're working with the county to clean up all these weird little pieces of annexed roadway and unannexed roadway. This little section is not annexed. So we would have to complete that, we would have to assume ownership of that section of road. We currently have an agreement in place where we maintain it, we don't own it. I'm sure the county would be happy to give it to us, I don't think there's any issue there. That's what he's working on with them to clean those up. Some other areas there's like a little tiny piece on Bertha Parkway that we don't own. There's some pieces on County Road 19 and some other areas in town. I don't think it will be a problem for us to take that right of way. I feel confident the county would support us taking ownership and control of that right of way.
so Mr. Birdsall, you're willing to do this urban style to gutter, or not gutter, but like ditchway, sidewalk and rail fence from the Heron Point sidewalk that ends all the way to the Heron Lake Parkway street, that whole southern part?
Well, just to be clear, what we had agreed to during our neighborhood master plan process was to design that and the town would pay for that, the portion that is in front of the county property. And that was just sidewalk only. When you start talking about doing curb in those types of scenarios, property that you don't own.
Yeah, I'm not talking about curb, I'm just saying,
Okay.
if we go with what you're saying, you would be willing to design and build, or just design?
Well, what we talked with the town about is that we would design it and the town would then fund it. So it would probably be built with our project, but it's a little bit out of the ordinary to, you know, build infrastructure in front of other people's property, but I mean, we can talk with the town about it. I don't think it's a huge cost, so if it's something that you guys want us to take on, I'm sure we can figure out a way to do it.
Any more questions for the applicant?
I just like the idea of having that, when that sidewalk.
We can go to
there.
that comment. Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Birdsall. All right, I'll open it up to the public now. First go if anyone's signed up here. We have no one signed up. Does anyone wish to speak that did not sign up? Ma'am? I think we all know your name right now, but if you could state it again anyways in your address.
Linda Wilson, 1461 Merlette Street, and I live in Heron Point. And I have a question. Is there going to be access from this new development onto 14?
Was that, yeah, is that the
Yes.
end of your comment?
Yes,
Okay, we're
yes.
gonna go see if anyone else needs to speak, and then we can answer that. Is there anyone in the audience that did not have a chance to sign up that wishes to speak right now? All right, at this time, I'll close the public comment portion, bring it back to the board. Administrator Kirk, do you mind?
No, there's no access directly into this platted area from County Road 14. It would come through, I forget the name of that street. Is it Hacienda?
Yep.
Can we go to that screen real quick?
The road on the east side of 17 Filing is called Pine Hill Road. And we're not planning any access to Pine Hill Road because that's a very rural road. So all of the access from this new filing would access through the existing neighborhood out to Heron Lakes Parkway, which then connects to County Road 14. It should be noted, a lot of discussion happened at Planning Commission about, you know, we would be widening the road on our side to provide bike lane. We're also doing a westbound left turn lane into the neighborhood on County Road 14. So there will be improvements to help address traffic concerns, traffic safety, and then obviously we've talked about the sidewalk connection that we're planning. So I think that the northern access, and that was a part of the comment letter that got handed out tonight, which we hadn't seen before. But they were asking for a safe walking path along County Road 14. So we've heard that repeatedly from neighbors, both in Heron Point and neighbors in the Kerry Martin neighborhood area, wanting to have a nice safe sidewalk to get over to the Front Range Trail and into the Heron Lakes neighborhood. So this will help achieve that.
Okay, thank you. So, I mean, the question was to get directly from Heron Point to this annexation, and the answer is you've got to go up to 14. Was that, because we can't go through Pine Hill Road anyways, right, because you don't even own it.
Yeah, there's no street connection to the west from Heron Point anyway, so there really would be no way for them to get there from their own neighborhood. They'd have to go out to County Road 14 or go south and, you know, through Grand Market and TPC Parkway.
I think there is a gap.
We have provided a gap. That was one of the conditions in our neighborhood master plan, to provide a gap so a future road could be built. But the reason we were reluctant, and I think staff agreed at the time, was, you know, the character of the development to our east is very, very rural. And so the idea of providing a connection between our neighborhood and that neighborhood didn't seem like the timing was right. Where if those properties ever were to redevelop, you know, and you know, instead of being 8-acre lots, they, you know, develop into something more, then we have the space to add a future street connection if it ever makes sense to do it.
I guess my question is, do we even have the ability to put something on Pine Hill Road legally?
Do you mean can
A
we
crusher
connect
fine,
it?
like trail, or?
Oh, no, we don't own Pine Hill Road.
Right, so there's no way we could make this a direct connection anyways.
With a road or with a
With
trail?
a trail, through a very rural section, but it's not anything we own.
I think I understand what you're saying.
Is that Miss Wilson's question, or am I totally off?
I'm not sure. To be
Did
honest.
anyone,
That was direct connection to County Road 14.
Yeah,
Which there is.
maybe I
It's-
misunderstood the question. I thought she was asking, is there like a separate road connection being constructed as part of this filing out to County Road 14? The answer is no. There's not a new road connection being made to County Road 14 from this filing. But if that was not the question, then I may have misunderstood.
Is that how everyone else understood that? Okay, all right. Thanks. Yeah, road, okay, thanks. Thank you. Okay, how does the board feel? We'll just go down, we'll start with trustee Sorcelli this time.
Because I appreciate the applicant's comments about keeping it rural, I'm in favor of the recommendation from the planning commission to wait for a later time to develop it. And because the applicant's willing to pitch in for some of that design work, I think that makes it a little bit more palatable to do it later on as well. But I see his argument and appreciated it.
Okay. Trustee Murphy?
Just a point of clarification, we've got the additional amended motions on page 2, I guess, regarding this. Can we accept those and ignore planning commission's recommendations? Am I correct? Okay.
They're offered as alternate motions.
Yes. So I guess my question is accepting the alternatives versus accepting the planning commission's recommendations. I would personally favor the secondary alternative amendments, or recommendations, I should say. I believe, just looking at, kind of the south side of the CR 14, I think it is worthwhile to put curb and gutter here. And I think it's appropriate to do that immediately, as stated here with the first building permit or prior to it. I think it makes sense to do this now. And I also appreciate the fact of pursuing that sidewalk connection. I think we should pursue that across those county properties if at all possible. So that's all my thoughts.
All right, thank you. Trustee Butler?
Question to staff is, since we're really looking at, it's not a matter of waiving this requirement for curb and gutter, it's a matter of when, now or later. Question to staff is, what are the pros and cons of now versus later?
I think the pro is that it gets built now, and it gets built by the developer as part of their project. I think the con, if I could boil it down into its simplest terms, the con is that depending on the timing of when this occurs, it may or may not ever happen. And it may be after this particular developer is no longer associated with the project or has completed the project. If the board prefers a rural section through that area, then I don't see that as a risk, because it may or may not ever happen, and maybe it doesn't matter. I think from a staff standpoint, we believe that the area on the south side of County Road 14 is fully suburban, certainly at least to Heron Lakes Parkway, and should have a suburban treatment on the road and the curb and gutter. I agree west of Heron Lakes Parkway, that's very unlikely to ever develop, and it will always remain rural. I think terminating curb and gutter at an existing intersection rather than just at the edge of a property line where it is now is a better condition. But I fully understand, and I actually appreciate Mr. Birdsell's argument. I think ultimately it's a determination of the town board, do you want a rural cross-section through here or not? If you do want a rural cross-section, I think there's very little risk to deferring the improvement. It's not really a con. If you do think this is more suburban in nature on the south side of the road, at least to Heron Lakes Parkway, then I would suggest that you not defer the improvement, and I think we can cobble together enough funds to make the connection if there isn't enough existing right-of-way there. I think that will be relatively simple to do.
Thank you.
So I agree that it's suburban in nature, and I agree that the natural or obvious, I think, cutoff would be the Heron Lakes Parkway. How does this correlate with the sidewalk? When would the sidewalk, regardless of this issue at hand, does it matter with this installing carbon gutter with the sidewalk? I think, I agree that the sidewalk's probably more important, and seeing that happen sooner than later.
I think the sidewalk will get constructed regardless. I don't think that's an issue. The only concern is curb and gutter. The sidewalk will be constructed in its ultimate location regardless of whether or not you defer the curb and gutter improvement.
And is the sidewalk required before permitting?
Yes.
What'll happen upfront? Okay. All right, then I personally am in agreement with staff's recommendation and trustee Murphy's to require the curb and gutter because of the suburban nature of the area to Heron Lakes Parkway.
So ignore the P and Z condition here. Trustee Hardy?
I'd be willing to be flexible on how some of this pans out, because I think really the priority for me would be to have adequate bicycle and foot traffic access so that we can maybe get some separation of those two from the vehicle traffic. I kind of need more information on what the drainage is like out there. Is curb and gutter gonna improve things? Will it make things worse? I kind of like to keep things consistent aesthetically from, Taft or Berthoud Parkway from Heron Point clear over to the intersection cutoff that Chris had talked about. But without actually seeing how much room do we have? Do we have room to build? I'd rather have a wider bike path and trail than curb and gutter if I had to give or take, than to have curb and gutter and a smaller sidewalk. So, without having like the measurements there to see how big of a space we have to work with, I'm having difficulty going either way, but I wanna be flexible on it so that we could have the ideal pedestrian and bicycle access.
I don't think, and Jim can correct me if he disagrees with me, I don't think that we're talking about trading off like a smaller sidewalk or less bike lane. The ultimate cross-section of the roadway will include an appropriate bike lane width. It'll include a required sidewalk width. And then the question is there curb and gutter in between those two things at the edge of the asphalt? And then associated drainage improvements that may or may not be necessary.
So then staff's perspective, with a curb and gutter, then is it desirable because it would improve drainage and safety? Or is it more aesthetics for keeping a consistent curb from Berthoud Parkway all the way down to Heron Lakes Parkway?
I think it's probably the latter. There's pros and cons of curb and gutter as well. Once you establish curb and gutter, you've effectively set the elevation of the edge of the roadway, and so when you go through to do repaving projects and things, it changes how you handle that. Whereas if there's no curb and gutter, you can just lay new asphalt down on top of the old asphalt if that's what you wanna do.
Yeah, and then you get
There's some of those details that change in the future.
that rough edge and
It
creates an unsafe situation. in some
That's the
cases.
other challenge when you have a roadway that doesn't have curb and gutter. You're much more likely to get aggregate on the roadway. You're much more likely for the edge of that roadway to degrade over time because of weed intrusion or
Without curb and gutter.
without curb and gutter. So it's a little bit of a
Asphalt breaks away and starts falling.
asphalt can break away. Runoff can deteriorate the edge of the roadway. That happens throughout town. I'll be honest. I think it's probably 6 1/2 a dozen other. Both have some positives. Both have some negatives. I think from our standpoint, we see this as, again, I think we see it as suburban in nature to Heron Lakes Parkway from County Road 14. And from our perspective, that would be curb gutter rather than a rural cross section. But again, I don't know that one is wrong and one is right. I guess is the best way to say it. I think it's
But it's a known that we would have plenty of room to do curb and gutter and a nice pedestrian.
Yeah, I mean,
bicycle
it
access.
would have to meet our, it would have to meet our standards that we've adopted through the Lucas standards. Appropriate sidewalk width, tree line, curb and gutter.
Are you in favor of that condition, or trying to write this down so we can narrow it down later?
I mean, I'd like to see a nice clean edge there that's consistent all the way from Berthoud Parkway out to their street at that intersection change, so I think it'd be a nice sight line to their entrance. Granted, the north side would be rough, but the south side would be nice and finished and be a nice, I think, improvement for their development, so. Curb and gutters, like putting that nice black crayon line around your Crayola drawings, so
Mhm.
outlines it nice, so.
Okay.
Clean edge, I'll go for clean.
Trustee Ayers, how do you feel about this?
Um,
For the whole thing, not just the curb and gutter?
yeah, actually, may I ask, trustee Murphy, could you clarify, that you said that, you think that it's appropriate for curb and gutter, is it for aesthetics and safety as well? That,
Largely due to the character, you know, looking to the east, along with the character of the development we're putting in. I agree that it's suburban in nature, and I don't see an aesthetic issue having, you know, fully built out curb and gutter eventually on that south side and totally kind of rural character on the left. That's my opinion. Obviously, you know, I tend to agree with Administrator Kurt's opinion of kind of the character of that section of roadway. But it's opinion, you know, so.
alright, thank you.
That's where I stand.
And I guess I had another question. Mr. Birdsall said that they've been negotiating about the sidewalk. Is it, I guess, appropriate or possible to add another condition that the sidewalk connection be built?
Do you mean the section across the county road or the county portion?
Correct.
We've had this similar issue in other projects, and the condition the board made at the time was that staff work with the developer to make a connection.
Okay.
To impose that connection on the developer, I would probably defer to Aaron about whether or not we can require them to make improvements on an adjacent property they don't own, even though it's in the public right of way.
I mean, I'm completely fine giving
Yeah.
the benefit of the doubt. I mean, we've worked with these guys for a long time. I just want to make sure that
100%.
there was a precedent for that
Yeah.
kind of decision.
And I will say, we've been working with them for a long time.
Yeah.
We expect to be working with them for a long time. There's a lot left in their development, a lot of exciting stuff. So this isn't like a make or break deal, I don't think, from the town's perspective. That's my opinion. But again, we think that south side is suburbanized, if I could say it that way, and will ultimately be that way. And so having finished curb and gutter there feels appropriate to us.
I'm more concerned about the sidewalk, but if a majority of the trustees would like the condition to have the curb and gutter be a prerequisite, then I'm fine with that as well, but I'm mostly concerned with the sidewalk.
The sidewalk and the gap. Because the
Yes,
sidewalk
yes,
sounds.
the sidewalk and the gap,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
I'm mostly concerned with that, however, aesthetically, yes, it's pleasing, but I don't really have a care one way or another, but if, most of the trustees want it, then I'm glad to make that a condition as well.
And if I may, knowing that, Mr. Birdsall stated they're willing to help design that county stretch. And I think we can easily fund the construction. We have, in other areas of Heron Lakes, we've paid for improvements that they constructed. And this would be really no different. It would be, I think, relatively straightforward to do. I wouldn't expect it to be prohibitively expensive. It won't be cheap, but
Be cheaper to do it all as one project than two separate ones though, right? And that's the goal, right, is to do this all at once.
typically it's cheaper to have a contractor that's already mobilized on site do the work. With curb gutter and asphalt, a lot of it's how much you gotta grade and how many, utilities have to be moved and, but concrete costs what concrete costs. Typically unit prices are pretty consistent.
The ultimate goal is to do this all at once rather than sooner or later.
Ideally, it would just all be finished.
Yeah.
From County Line Road or not County Line Road, excuse me, from Berthoud Parkway over to Heron Lakes Parkway, we'd be done.
Nice.
Yeah, did that answer your?
Yep, it answered my question. Mayor Pro Tem?
I guess only remaining question I have, on the packet here, it says that there's an existing curb and walkway at the TPC Parkway. Is that essentially there is there's already curb that exists kind of like right off of that, is what I'm seeing on this. Is that, I guess, accurate?
They've constructed the improvements along Heron Lakes Parkway already.
So there is a tiny little piece of curb there.
I can't remember. Jim, you know, is it vertical curb or is it,
This is just to keep from cars cutting the corner too tight.
Yeah, so the curb kind of, begins the curve, where Heron Lakes Parkway meets County Road 14, and then it kind of ends. But if this is the desire, it sounds like that's the direction you guys are going, is to ask for curb and gutter. It would be very logical and easy for us to connect at that intersection and extend it to the east, and it would look just like it was meant to be.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
No, I'm making sure, because I hear your argument of like, hey, it's a great place for it to stop because this is gonna transition it out and everything's gonna flow. Totally, get it. My thought is, if it already has kind of a natural ending point as opposed to just like vanishing, it actually has an ending point as it comes into that roadway. That's my thought on it. I mean, as the biggest thing I think all of us agree on is the sidewalk is the most crucial part. If it's curb or sidewalk, sidewalk's gonna win. But in this instance, because there's a natural spot for that curb to go, I think it makes sense. I mean, honestly, I hear what you're saying. I think it made sense if like, yeah, we could end it here if that curb down over there didn't really exist in that natural kind of progression. That'd be a pretty solid argument. I'd be okay with that. But because it does have that natural ending point, I think it would make more sense to have it eventually conclude there for that.
Okay, so it sounds like you're in favor of ignoring?
Yeah.
Okay. Planning and zoning condition. Anything else?
No.
Okay. To trustee Ayers' point, so where we're standing now is that staff would construct that sidewalk at the same time in that gap, or that's just an option?
the board would have to approve the expenditure, but yes, we would recommend that we would fund the construction of the curb gutter and sidewalk in that gap, assuming that it fits within the right of way.
Okay, and when we did this for Harvest Ridge, I believe we required a connection from Harvest Ridge to future Bertha 160.
We required the developer to work with town staff to make a connection.
And how do you how do you read that? It's kind of a broad condition we put on you. Does that mean that the developer pays, which is kind of how I thought of it?
No, I think our expectation was that we would pay to make that connection, that gap connection. At least that's the way I took that condition. It was broad.
It was broad. I'm kind of regretting that. One way or the other. I wish I was more specific with you.
Specificity is always
does
good,
help.
but it's always, it's
Double-edged
always
sword.
hard to catch everything, right?
So that's not a condition right now. Okay. Well, I'm gonna go back through, I guess I agree with you. My point is more of the sidewalk itself, that connection.
And if the board would prefer to defer the curb and gutter, staff fully supports, again, we would still wanna make the sidewalk connection regardless. And they're still going to build the sidewalk along their portion. And they will be fully responsible for paying for the sidewalk along their portion, we would pay for the portion through the county property, irrespective of curb and gutter.
Okay, so I'm in favor of delaying that condition for planning and zoning as well, or I'm sorry, of ignoring planning and zoning's delay, and just getting it done with. So I'm just a little confused here, maybe the board can help me here. We are saying right now that the town will work with the applicant to finish that gap, sidewalk gap over where we need to add that, if the board agreed.
If I can clarify, that was a condition that was placed on us at the neighborhood master plan.
Okay, so it's already on there.
So we're already planning on carrying that forward, so I'll defer to the staff, but I don't believe you need to add that as a condition. We feel like it already is a condition.
I'm okay with that.
So that is, we'll call that a condition already.
It's already there.
Okay, so even if we're all cool with that? Yeah. I guess it's already made, so if we're not cool, I guess somehow we'd have to pull it out, but we're good. Okay, I agree with that too. So it sounds like the majority of us are in favor of ignoring the planning and zoning condition, and the sidewalk connection will already be in there from the neighborhood master plan. Is there anything else, board?
So which one are we?
The second one.
The second, okay, that's over. Okay.
Would anyone like to move on this?
I'll move on it. I'll move to approve the preliminary plat for Heron Lake 17th filing with the following conditions. The applicant shall construct curb and gutter along County Road 14E prior to the issuance of first building permit for Heron Lake 17th filing. condition B. County Road 14E, construction plans shall be submitted with the final plat submittal for review. In condition C, the applicant shall apply for and receive approval of rezoning prior to approval of a final plat.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Mayor Pro Tem Grace is seconded. All right, we have a motion by trustee Murphy, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Grace. Is there any final discussion on this? Amendments or such? Clerk, may a roll call vote, please.
Trustee Ayers,
Yes.
trustee Sorcelli,
Yes.
trustee Butler,
Yes.
trustee Hardy,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Grace.
Yes.
Trustee Murphy,
Yes.
Mayor Karspeck.
Yes. All right, thank you, Mr. Birdsall.
Thank you.
Let's take a 5-minute meeting back to order. We're going to do our final agenda item of the regular meeting tonight, and this will be our tranche 2 of our oil and gas discussion. And we have Attorney Mike Foote here tonight, who's been leading this effort. Welcome. Thank you for waiting for the whole meeting.
All right, thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, trustees. I'm pleased to be back in front of you to talk about oil and gas. I'm sure you're equally pleased to talk about it as well. And I hope that you had a chance to take a look at the memorandum that I produced and listened out to you a couple of days ago. What I'm hoping to do today is not to go over it word for word, of course, but to maybe summarize it a little bit and get your ideas and direction about where to go from here. So just to give you a quick outline of what I'm hoping to be able to do tonight. First, we'll review over the process so far and what we're looking to do for the next couple of meetings. The bulk of the presentation will be about what we call the Tranche 2 comparisons, the 10 different categories that I outlined in the memorandum, ranging from air quality to seismic operations to miscellaneous safety provisions.
Attorney Foote, if we could just wait 1 second, our screen's still, we don't have what's up on the.
Oh, okay.
Thanks. All right, we're good now. Thanks.
Great. And then finally, as I mentioned, I'm hoping to have, of course, questions and any kind of discussion and direction that you'd like to provide as we move through the Tranche 2 process. So just again, a review over the process. We had talked about, and we have been dividing this up roughly into 3 tranches of oil and gas regulations. First, roughly dealt with location, that was setbacks of new facilities from existing homes and also setbacks of new homes from existing facilities, that's reciprocal setbacks, and some of the ordinances that were around the setbacks and location issue. That's something that we discussed, and you also gave your preliminary approval to draft regulations in Tranche 1 at the last meeting. So now we're on to Tranche 2, which is broadly health and safety regulations. And then after we get done with Tranche 2, we hope to move on to Tranche 3, which is more process and enforcement. And by process, I mean application process, permitting process, decision-making process, those types of things. As I've been going through Tranche 2 and trying to put together this presentation, I've found that I think there might be a little bit of a mashing together of Tranche 2 and 3 at some point in time. It's not going to be a very bright line, dividing line perhaps, depending on your direction. But that's okay. Ultimately, the idea is that we would come back with a full draft of regulations that you all would discuss and then ultimately take a vote on and see where we go from there. I'll say the hardest part about the Tranche 2 process has been taking really voluminous information across jurisdictions as well as the COGCC and trying to distill it down to something that is not nearly as voluminous, something that's just more discussable, something that's more digestible. For example, the COGCC regulations are over 500 pages long, and clearly that's not the direction that you all want to go. And so I'm trying to do that. I hope that I've been able to do that at least in the memorandum in the discussion tonight, but please let me know how I do, because that's been the hardest part of trying to summarize the health and safety regulations across COGCC, the state, as well as our comparison local jurisdictions. Okay, so the proposed new ordinance that would take effect is in front of you here, and it's been divided up into 14 sections. Again, this is all just tentative and proposed, but you'll see that it's color-coded. The green ordinance sections are those that we have dealt with, or that you have dealt with preliminarily about location. The ones that are in red would be the ones that would be covered by tranche 2 roughly, and then the ones in black would roughly be covered by tranche 3. So just to give you an overview of where we'd be going with that. Okay, so let's talk about the areas, the areas that I've divided with these regulations. First is air quality. And I'll say also air quality, and then these other two that I'll be discussing, which the next two, just to give you a preview, include odor and noise. Those really make up the three categories that have turned out to be perhaps the most controversial or getting the most types of complaints from residents. Air quality, noise, and odor really make up a lot of the complaints that have occurred when you have oil and gas development close to residential areas. And so just hopefully you'll keep that in mind as we go through, and that's part of the reason why I focus on what I do with air quality and noise and odor, is to, at the end of the day, try to be protective with the regulations and try to avoid the kind of conflicts that other local jurisdictions have seen. So with air quality, there are a number of layers of regulation. Of course, it starts with the federal level with the Clean Air Act. It goes down to the state level. There's the Air Quality Control Commission at the state under the CDPHE, the Department of Public Health and Environment. And then there's local regulations. And so it's actually, the way that it interlocks together is kind of complicated. But the bottom line is, in many cases, local jurisdictions have the ability to go above and beyond certain types of air quality regulations when it comes to oil and gas. And so in some local jurisdictions have done that. The comparison local jurisdictions that you look at, and as a review, they include Broomfield, Erie, Larimer County, and Superior. Those are the comparison local jurisdictions. They all have done additional things in the area of air quality. And so that option would be, of course, open to you as well. But it covers things like, in the other local jurisdictions, as well as the state regulation, cover areas like a limitation or prohibition on flaring and venting. The flaring is the picture that you see in front of you on this slide. They also deal with leak detection and repair. The state deals with that as well. And the state, as well as comparison local jurisdictions, do various things with the emissions control strategies. So the local jurisdiction certainly can do that. You may be wondering, well, if the state has these regulations as well as the feds, but if the state have these regulations, then, why would the locals go above and beyond? And the answer has been that there have been a number of local jurisdictions that think the state regulations don't go far enough in protecting their residents from air issues. So there can be a number of things that you can consider. And if you wanted to look into further, you could obviously look through the regulations that I've linked. But there are things like, for example, the use of non-road engines in order to drill and complete the operations. Some local regulations have required those to be operated through electricity rather than diesel, which saves a lot of emissions. That's not a state regulation. The state doesn't require that, but some locals do require that. Other things that have been considered but have not been adopted at this point in time for local jurisdictions, but they would include timing restrictions. So we all are in the ozone non-attainment area, and during ozone season, which is roughly, say, like June through August, any kind of additional ozone in the area that could be ozone from oil and gas operations and other types of activities could contribute negatively to the air quality. And so timing restrictions would be something that you could consider. Other local jurisdictions have not implemented those yet, and neither of the state, but it's certainly been on the menu of people of things to consider. So that is all to say that there are things that you could consider that are above and beyond what the state does. In addition, there are a number of jurisdictions that take the approach that they say, for example, okay, you have to comply with everything the state requires you to comply to, and they write that into their regulations, as well as these additional things that we're requiring you to do. There's some advantages of that. Obviously, they have to comply with the state. If they don't comply with the state, then they can be penalized by the state. But a number of local jurisdictions have found is that the state, in their opinions, have not been as good as enforcement as they would like. So if you are able to put something in your regulations that say follow the state, as well as do these things, if they violate a rule that is a state rule, then you have the option, this gets into the tranche 3, but you have the option of also talking about how you can enforce that as well as a town instead of relying upon the state. So if the state's not doing the job that you think they should be doing, or if they're too slow, then you could consider putting that into your enforcement regime. So that would be one advantage of adopting that, but it's not necessary at all. And sometimes you can, there's some local jurisdictions, not our comparison ones, but some that just defer to the state and say, do what the state tells you, and that's gonna be that when it comes to air quality. So roughly, those are some of the options when it comes to air quality. Odor is somewhat related, of course. Odor sometimes is hard to pin down. It's very transitory. It kind of comes and goes. But it also makes up a lot of complaints when you deal with oil and gas development in residential areas. So it's sporadic, it's hard to measure. The types of complaints that come in, what has happened before is the state has come out to investigate, but the state comes out a couple of days later and the odor is gone at that point in time. So the local jurisdictions that have had to deal with this, in particular Erie, has really tried pretty hard to deal with this. They put in general and specific regulations. So when I say general regulations, it's usually some kind of a statement that says the odor shall not be a nuisance. And it can cross-reference to what a nuisance is in the local code. And then also can be specific. Like in Erie, it says, no emission of odorous gases or other odorous matter shall be permitted in such quantities as to be readily detectable when diluted in the ratio of 1 volume of odorous air to 4 volumes of clean air. So that's a very specific regulation. So it really runs the gamut of more general to more specific. And again, kind of getting into enforcement issues with Tranche 3, but that's really some of the name of the game, because if there's an odor complaint or many odor complaints, the local residents come to their town board and they want to know how come this isn't being addressed. They go to the state too, but often the state has not been able to respond quick enough to solve the issue. So you'll want to consider that when it comes to the odor regulations that you enact. Noise is kind of the same thing. I put noise and vibrations here because you have A-level, A-scale noise and C-scale noise. That's associated with oil and gas operations. So this graph that I put in front of you on the PowerPoint is verbatim from the COGCC regulations on noise, how they divide it. This isn't necessarily the berthed zoning areas, but they divide it between agricultural, residential, rural, commercial ag, light industrial, industrial, and then at the bottom you see all zones for C-scale noise. And then they have it divided between the daytime hours roughly and the nighttime hours roughly. And this is a pretty similar approach that we see with other local jurisdictions as well. I wouldn't see any reason to depart from it necessarily, but you want to keep in mind that, again, just like odor and air quality, this is one of the biggest complaints that people will lodge about noise. And also somewhat like odor, but not quite as much like odor, it is a bit transitory. Noise can come and go. It may not be excessive noise for a 10-hour period. It could be a 1-hour period. It could be a 2-hour period. But unlike odor, there are actually ways to be able to measure it and enforce it after the fact through noise monitoring programs. And there are a number of local jurisdictions that put those requirements in. So with dust, there's not a lot to say here. All the local jurisdictions that are comparison jurisdictions have a requirement to minimize dust. The COGCC does not allow produced water to be used to minimize dust, so they don't allow produced water to be sprayed on the gravel roads in order to minimize dust. Produced water is the water that comes up during the fracking operation, so it's got a lot of volatile organic compounds and NOx and other bad things in it, so it makes sense that it would be prohibited from being sprayed on the gravel roads to stop dust. But the local and the COGCC regulations all talk about minimizing dust. With water quality, there's really 3 main areas that the local jurisdictions cover, as well as the COGCC and the Water Quality Control Commission all at the state. So again, we kind of have interlocking jurisdictions here. One is a prohibition on certain types of chemicals that can be used. One of the types of chemicals that have made the news lately are PFAS chemicals, forever chemicals that are found in pretty much all of our water now, unfortunately. There is one jurisdiction, Broomfield, that's a comparison jurisdiction that just outright prohibits the use of PFAS in oil and gas operations. But that's not the only type of chemical that's prohibited to be used. There's a list of them as well. The second area roughly that the regulations cover would be monitoring and testing programs. So water monitoring programs, water testing programs to make sure that the local water is not being contaminated by any oil and gas operations. And finally, there are some jurisdictions that would like to have information about the type of water that's being used. Where is it coming from? Also prohibitions, for example, of some local jurisdictions that just can't sell water or are not allowed to sell water to oil and gas operations because they should use it for something else. That's what Erie does. So there's limitations and there's also disclosure about where the water is coming from, how much water would be used, et cetera, that some jurisdictions require. With lighting and visual impacts, there's not a lot to talk about here. It's pretty much the same throughout. There's some regulations on for example, the direction of lights on the drill rigs and the fact that they should be pointed down instead of out, which makes a lot of sense, but the regulations are in place anyway. And also some places like Superior require specific landscaping requirements to mitigate the visual impacts of oil and gas operations. When it comes to transportation impacts, this is mostly a local issue. The state doesn't really have a lot of jurisdiction over this. The exception with the COGCC is they have safety requirements for the transportation of produced water. But when it comes to roads and infrastructure, that's going to be almost an exclusively local issue and jurisdiction. So the comparison jurisdictions have information in there and require, in many cases, agreements to repair road damage or have some kind of a transportation assessment fee assessed to ahead of time deal with any kind of damage that occurs with roads. So you'll want to consider that as well as part of your ultimate regulations there. So seismic operations, that's a little bit different of an animal. It's obviously not, it doesn't deal with oil and gas drilling per se, it deals with the precursor to oil and gas drilling. They're trying to map out what it looks like so that they may decide to drill there. And as it turns out, seismic operations have caused a bit of an uproar at times with local folks because these trucks that you see in front of you are not very common, so they don't know what they're for, and they also sometimes make a bit of a ruckus. And so a lot of the local jurisdictions require permits and approval ahead of time before engaging in seismic operations. And also notice when they're about to engage so that the local jurisdiction can give the notice to the residents that this is in fact happening. When it comes to wildlife impacts, generally all jurisdictions and the comparison jurisdictions have language that talks about minimizing adverse impacts to wildlife. They generally defer to the state regimes, the COGCC and also the Colorado Parks and Wildlife really have the expertise, a lot of expertise about this, not solely the expertise, but certainly they have a lot of expertise about wildlife impacts. And so what we see from the comparison local jurisdictions is a lot of general language about minimizing impacts, but not a lot of specific regulations that go above and beyond what the state requires when it comes to mitigating and minimizing adverse wildlife impacts. And the same really goes for reclamation as well. And reclamation is what you do to put the land back into place after the oil and gas operation is done. And it should be distinguished though, because there's a jurisdictional issue here. Reclamation is what you do to the land to put it back into place, but plugging and abandonment is what you do to make sure that the well, when it's done, doesn't leak and it's just out of service at that point. Now, the plugging and abandoning regime is something that's within the COGCC's jurisdiction because it deals with downhole. The COGCC has downhole, so anything that happens underground is solely within the COGCC's jurisdiction. Surface impacts are concurrent jurisdiction between the COGCC and the local government. So reclamation is concurrent jurisdiction between the state and the locals. But the downhole, what it takes to plug and abandon, the kind of mechanical integrity testing that's required, that's all COGCC. So in short, you don't really have to worry about that. But you can, if you choose to have some specific reclamation regulations within your code. Generally, the comparison jurisdictions have, again, kind of like wildlife, some general language about reclamation, but often defer to the state to do the bulk of the work when it comes to reclamation regulations. And then kind of the ubiquitous miscellaneous category here, I put safety regulations in this that include things like pipelines and the monitoring and testing of the well site facilities. Of course, all above ground because that's concurrent local jurisdiction. And prohibitions of certain types of materials, open burning, things like that. So it's all under the miscellaneous safety regulations that local jurisdictions, at least in the comparison categories, have done. So, just to kind of go over a little bit about maybe opening up for discussion after this about how to proceed when it comes to coming up with a rough draft of Tranche 2 regulations. And by the way, I should have mentioned this at the beginning, but like what we did with Tranche 1, what I have in mind here is that take direction from the board and then come back with some kind of a draft of what your Tranche 2 regulations would look like, and then proceed with discussion based upon that, and then ultimately come up with, kind of like a final draft of Tranche 2 for your preliminary approval. So that's what would be in mind for the next meeting based on how you want to proceed at this point in time. So the first thing that hopefully we can discuss is really more of a general direction type of inquiry. So when I say general direction, what I had surmised from our discussions before is you're looking for that Goldilocks area. I keep thinking of the word Goldilocks. I think one of you put it that way, but the Goldilocks area, it seems like, at least with Tranche 1, was you want it to be protective. You want to try to avoid conflict between oil and gas drilling and residential areas, which makes sense. But you're not necessarily looking to set a trend. You're not looking to be kind of the leader in the area or something that's untested. But maybe look at something where, look, if these comparison local jurisdictions have done 2,000 feet out for the setback, then we're comfortable with 2,000 feet as well, but we're not comfortable with a kilometer out. That's what I took from our discussions with Tranche 1. And so I guess if that is your direction with Tranche 2 as well, then I can take that and use that to come up with some proposed Tranche 2 safety and health and welfare regulations, kind of thinking about the Goldilocks philosophy here. I put down here, consider interplay with the Tranche 3 application processes, and I'm going to talk about that in this second part of the bullet points here. There is one of the issues with safety and health and welfare regulations is they're often changing. Technology changes, not just in oil and gas, but in many things. But we see it with oil and gas in particular, where what is considered to be a cutting edge protection now, 5 years from now, may seem like it's not cutting edge at all. And there's other things that come along that are more protective. And so the question arises, how is it that you want to deal with that? I mean, do you want it to be whenever there's some kind of a new regulation that's more cutting edge, then you have to amend your ordinance? Do you want to do it like some other jurisdictions have done it, where they have a separate list as an attached like an appendix of what they call best management practices, where it just lists out all of the different types of protections that the operator would need to use in order to get a permit approved and berthed? And just as a side note, people call them best management practices, and I like to call them conditions of approval, because a best management practice is not necessarily the best management practice. There may be something that's better, but operators and others call it best management practices because it's just kind of a term that has just become used all the time. So I typically try to call them conditions of approval. It would be like application or permit conditions of approval, but it means the same thing. What kind of conditions are you attaching to the application that are protective of public health, safety, and welfare, so you can make sure that residents are protected, air quality is protected, and so forth. So Superior, for example, they recently redid their regulations, and then they had some general statements in their ordinance, but they said, see the best management practice appendix that we've attached, And it has a list of, it's like 15 pages of, here's the things that you should also do. These are the best management practices that are gonna be a condition of any kind of permit that we grant. So you could go that route. The third route, which is the route that I'm kind of leaning towards recommending, is something that that really Larimer County did for the most part, which is that they require conditions of approval or best management practices to be part of any kind of application that's submitted by the oil and gas operator. And so this is kind of where it starts to merge into Tranche 3, which is the application process, where they say, look, if you want to apply to have an operation here in Larimer County, you have to include all these things in your application. You're going to do all of these conditions of approval, all these best management practices, and just handle it through the application process. And so in order to submit a successful application, it's really up to the operator to say, this is how we're going to meet this condition of approval. This is how we're going to meet this best management practice, and all the way down the line, and being very specific that way. So the application process actually is very specific, and it also could include language that would say, here's all the conditions of approval that you have to meet, unless there's something better. And then the staff and then the trustees can determine what they think would be better as part of actually approving that application or denying it, if that's what you chose to do. So in summary, there's really kind of three ways to do it. One is you can just try to write everything into your ordinance, but you would need to revise it presumably pretty frequently when new things come about. You could do a separate appendix with best management practices, but again, you would probably need to revise that. Or number three, you could include conditions of approval or best management practices as part of the application process. And as I said, I'm leaning towards that because I do like the example that Larimer County has set on that. And I think that it is a code that reads pretty easily, discernible to the average person as well as the applicant, as well as to the governing body. And so if you all think that that's an appropriate way to go, then I probably will try to do that as part of the Tranche 2, the next part of the Tranche 2 process. So hopefully that was clear. I don't know, I felt like I was kind of spitting out a word salad there, but it's a little bit complicated when it comes to that because, as I said, you don't want to have 500 pages of regs. You probably don't want to have to revise them and have me show up every 6 months to do revisions, and so, or somebody else or whoever. So I think that third way, kind of the Larimer County example, might be the way to go. But the final thing that I'll talk about here is that what we typically see with the comparison jurisdictions, first of all, is more kind of a general, they put in general statements about how you need to protect, minimize, or mitigate adverse impacts. And you have general statements in the ordinance, but then it's followed with specific statements that talk about specific regulations that you have to follow. And the utility of that is that even if you have an applicant that checks all the boxes with some of the specific regulations, you as the board would still have flexibility in order to require more if you think that there's other protections that are out there that would help the residents more, or even deny the permit if you don't think that it's sufficiently protective of public health, safety, welfare, the environment, or wildlife. So it gives the governing body maximum flexibility to be responsive to what you think is appropriate as well as the constituents. So you have a general statement that the operators are aware of and know that they have to meet, but you also have specific statements, and you have board flexibility as well because obviously the ultimate, I shouldn't say obviously, but in most cases, the ultimate decision does come down to the elected body as to whether or not these permits should be granted. That's not universally the case, and that's going to be also part of a Tranche 3 discussion. But assuming that's the case here, then you probably would want to retain some flexibility so that you can take the whole picture in mind, hear the resident feedback, and come to your conclusion about whether or not the permit should be granted or denied or postponed, or whatever it is that you decide, like any other kind of land use type of application. So That is the conclusion of my summary. Hopefully it made sense. You probably have questions, and I'm happy to take those, and also I think put the PowerPoint back to some of these discussion points so that there might be a frame of reference if you wanted to proceed with some direction along those lines.
Thank you, Attorney Foot. Trustees, questions? Trustee Ayers?
So yeah, I have a couple questions. For the water quality section, the chemical prohibitions, what power does a town have to, because I know some of these chemicals from the previous one are proprietary and they won't say what's in them. So what power or control would we have over the kind of chemical? So instead of saying, you know, this specific chemical because it's proprietary, but we don't want this specific kind of chemical regardless of what your formula is for that. Does that make sense?
What kind of power would you have to prohibit that if you don't know what it is?
Right.
Well, so in the comparison jurisdictions as well as the state, there's a long list of chemicals that are prohibited and they're named. And so that's also would be part of the water monitoring program that would make sure that those chemicals are actually not involved in the operations. And so, so I don't really know if there are a lot that are right now withheld as proprietary, but there's a long list that are specifically named for water quality monitoring purposes. And the ones that are prohibited are things like PFAS chemicals, which are not confidential. And there's a few other categories of chemicals that are just outright prohibited. And if monitoring shows that PFAS is used and it can be traced back to the oil and gas operation, then that's an enforcement matter. So I'm not sure if I'm exactly answering your question. I think what you're concerned about is if there are chemicals that are secret, how is it that we can actually prohibit them? I don't think there's a lot that are secret or proprietary at this point. That was a debate when it came to disclosing chemicals in fracking fluid for quite some time. The vast majority of chemicals are disclosed. I think there still are some that are considered proprietary, at least at the state level. But to the extent that Bertha could deal with it, there's still a long list of chemicals that are disclosed and named and can be prohibited as part of the program.
Go ahead. So, did you want to follow up on that?
Yeah, more specifically, I guess, a question. If we had, could we pretty much say if you're using proprietary chemicals, it's just no? If you're not willing to even disclose it, the answer is no. Is that something we could do according to ordinance? Essentially, if they decide that, oh, we're gonna use proprietary stuff, we can straight up put in there, no proprietary mixes are allowed, period. Then they at least have to say, okay, well, it's actually all of this, and then it would fall back into the whole, you know, what is and is not allowed.
I don't think I've specifically seen that language in the comparison jurisdictions, but I also don't, off the top of my head, think that there's a limitation to you saying that. And so what I'll do then is I'm going back and kind of writing these Tranche 2 regulations, I'll look into that in more detail. I mean, it could be part of your application process. Like, if you want to apply here, you have to disclose this information.
Yep.
And so as long as it doesn't run afoul of state law and confidentiality that's in state law, which is not coming to mind at the moment.
Sure.
Then I think you could write that in there. I'll say that tentatively.
Okay. I feel much better about it because that proprietary disclaimer, it just doesn't ride right with me.
Transparency.
Yeah, ethically, it doesn't make me feel okay, and
yeah,
so yeah, that was the end.
Okay.
My second one is for transportation impacts, and this might be too in the weeds for this conversation, but in previous studies, I guess, how many truck trips do these wells produce, and sort of in relation to traffic code and traffic pollution? I think you addressed this a little bit, and once again, I don't necessarily want to get into the specifics of that if that's not appropriate for this level.
offhand, I can't give you numbers, but that information is disclosed, or at least expected truck trips is disclosed as part of their state applications. And so that information can easily be tracked down. If you're interested, then, you know, I can pull a couple of state applications just as samples. And what they say in those applications is, we're expecting 1,000 round-trip truck trips during the pre-production phase, and, you know, 500 during the production phase, or whatever.
And legally, I guess, could that be used to either clear or decline an application? Just the adherence or not to our traffic code or something like that?
Yes, I mean, it'd be like anything else. If you think that the traffic impacts are something that runs afoul of public health, safety, welfare, the environment, and wildlife, then it's something that you can use to make your decision about whether or not to accept or to approve or to deny the permit, just like anything.
Thank you. And this is not gonna be a very good question because I wrote a note for myself and I can't remember why I wrote a note for myself.
Welcome to the club.
Yeah. But it was under the air quality state compliance, and I had a question, and this is kind of going back to tranche 1, but I remember, or I wrote down that schools tend to be 2,000-foot setbacks, but then there are lesser requirements for other types of buildings for residentials, for parks, et cetera, et cetera. Why is it, and once again, this might be inappropriate for this level, but why is it that schools are set back further than residential?
The theory behind that is that you have a lot of people in one area, so a school will have 500, 1,000 people within the building, as opposed to one residential unit which has 4 people. So, and the same goes for childcare centers or senior living centers or hospitals, apartment complexes. All of those, because they have more people, are typically, or at least sometimes, set back further, like 2,500 feet versus 2,000 feet. I don't think that there's any kind of scientific study that says, hey, if you're 2,500 feet as an apartment complex, it's great, as opposed to 2,000 feet. But the setback discussion, as we talked about, is a lot about just kind of, you know, this is our best estimate, and this is what's realistic, so this is what we're gonna adopt.
Okay, and I guess a follow-up on that is, in that decision, scientific or not, right, was, I guess, time in the area a part of that decision-making process? Do you know, or?
I think it's mostly number of people that are affected. You know, an apartment complex has many more than just one house. I think that's generally what the discussion has been about. But your point is well taken, though. You know, you have a business, somebody's there 8 hours, as opposed to a residence where someone can be there 24. So that all makes sense, and I think is a rational justification to coming up with something different than what other jurisdictions have done. But generally, it's been because there's lots more people in a hospital as opposed to just one house.
That's all I had. But also, thank you for the presentation and the information that you give us and the way you give us. It's not word salad, so I really appreciate that. That's all I had.
Great. Other questions?
I just have one. So in this document that kind of compares Berthoud to the other rules, wherever does it show a link to a code, it means that we don't currently have a standard for that. Is that correct?
You mean under the Berthoud? Yeah, for Berthoud, I put NA for not applicable.
Okay.
If Berthoud doesn't have a standard. And in fairness, the Berthoud code was adopted in 2017. And that was before it was clarified under the 2019 bill that local jurisdictions have this ability to do surface impacts. So Berthoud, amongst other jurisdictions, just often didn't touch some of these areas.
So to clarify, the majority of these areas, we don't have any current code.
Correct.
That's additional, or that's even up to what the state regulations are.
That's right.
Thank you.
Trustee Murphy.
My questions were right in line with Trustee Sorosali's. You know, many of these areas, just looking kind of briefly over our code, kind of look like they could fit within our existing, you know, code and ordinances. Is it recommended by you and staff that we largely segregate out the oil regulations from our existing kind of code language, or is it beneficial to kind of bring that language into our existing kind of code and ordinances? I guess I don't see much conflict with it, but just so both policies mesh in areas like noise, we already have kind of language towards that that does not address, oil and gas, but I was just considering how does that work, from our existing versus what we would do new.
Yeah, that makes sense. Most local jurisdictions, including all of our comparison local jurisdictions, have it segregated out. They just have oil and gas. But that doesn't mean that that's how you have to do it. And in fact, even those that have it segregated out, like Larimer County, sometimes they cross-reference existing regulations. Like with, I think with wildlife, they do that in particular. They basically say, it's the chapter 11 is the oil and gas code in Larimer County, and they say, see chapter 4 for wildlife, which applies to everything. And so they do that in some cases, but they also have their own oil and gas code. So there could be instances where if it makes sense, like a noise ordinance, you could just refer back and say, see the existing berthed noise ordinance that's generally applicable. So you could do that, but I think it would be unusual to try to integrate everything about oil and gas in the existing code. It also makes it easier for residents, applicants, everybody else to just look and say, if there's an oil and gas application, we look at, Title 30, Chapter 11, Section 101, et cetera. And we have a pretty clear oil and gas code in front of us.
Okay, that certainly clarifies things from my standpoint. I could certainly see, the new code referencing like our wildlife provisions, which basically are referencing the state. But for other areas, I certainly see the need for, separate kind of regulations on oil and gas, I guess. So that's all I've got.
Other questions? Do we have anything about prairie dogs in our current wildlife? Okay.
Not that I know of.
Ursa Major was just talking about it. Maybe we think, you know what?
The black plague spreaders, not them.
Well, no, it's not like that. There's an actual program in the state that you can apply for now where they have land in southern Colorado and they'll help you actually relocate them. So it's not like we don't know where to put them. There's an actual program to relocate them.
Prairie dogs is one thing that I have not found in any comparison local jurisdiction regulations. So you've found the one thing that seems to not.
No one likes them because they break horse legs, but now we don't have horses anymore.
I think we don't like them for a lot of reasons.
Or we could-
Horses are one of them.
I'm a big fan of them actually, but
Really?
Or yeah, why not? Little squirrels. Or we could do what Ursa Major was talking about and have osprey nests up there and make it a whole scene.
I just saw the bald eagle fly over downtown Berkeley this morning.
There we go. Just thoughts. Okay, that was my only question. Anything else from the board? Let's open it up to the public, unless it's particular. It's not a public hearing. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Foote. We'll open up to the public here. Do we have a sign-up sheet for this?
We do not.
Okay. If you're here to speak on this, could you just raise your hand and I'll just call on you or pick you? I'm sure you are. Okay, please come to the front, state your name and address.
I am Leslie Tassie at 945 North Fourth Street.
Okay.
I wish we could bring up that picture of Berthoud with the fence and the mountains in the background because.
I can do that for you.
Great.
That's just the next slide. That one.
Okay. Can you put that up there?
We got it.
It's up to them.
Oh, okay. All right.
I don't think that's developed yet.
All right, good evening, everyone. I'm speaking here tonight as an artist who lives in the town of Berthoud. I know the subject I'd like to share with you isn't a part of Mr. Foote's tranches. However, I feel that the following issue needs to be addressed to confront the proverbial elephant that sits in Berthoud's living room. The issue I feel the need to bring before you is this: the aesthetics of our town in relation to future possible drilling and fracking down the road. Your discussion and concerns about the future of oil and gas in this town has never mentioned how the eventual drilling rigs and well pads would affect Berthoud's proud reputation as the garden spot of Colorado. Dare I say it may never have entered the conversation. The primary motivation for my move here to Berthoud in 2013 was the breathtaking views of the mountains and the gently rolling fields surrounding the town. I'm sure that I've not been the only one struck by the unmatched beauty of which Berthoud can be proud. Sadly, over the past 10 years since I've lived here, those views and fields have been obscured by thousands of tract homes, miles and miles and miles of them. I know I'm not alone, as one who is appalled at the sea of rooftops that have invaded our now fast disappearing fields of corn and alfalfa. Back in the day, Berthoud must have taken inordinate pride in her unique views that inspired artists and photographers from near and far. Now you are discussing the possibility of yet another blight on Berthoud's landscape, permanent well pads that will sully former pure and unobstructed views from fields to the high peaks of our beloved Rockies. Discussions and regulations concerning the health, welfare, and safety of the environment and wildlife and oil and gas development have their place and are crucial in the future of this town. However, no one has addressed how Berthoud would look with well pads scattered and tainting the landscape around her perimeter. Do we want to become another Weld County or other towns whose landscapes have fallen victim to the unmitigated ugliness of the oil and gas industry? There are alternatives. Mr. Mayor and honored board members, you have the power to set an example of honoring the natural beauty of our town's surroundings. We are still small enough to preserve what we have, to cherish the designation of the garden spot of Colorado, to open our arms to artists, photographers, and craftspeople as a mecca in an otherwise defiled front range. The beauty and charm of our town is unique. Take a moment to step outside and look over the fields toward the snow-capped mountains under a brilliant blue Colorado
Ms.
sky.
Tassi, we've hit our 3 minutes.
May I have one more sentence?
No, one more sentence, go ahead.
Then really search your hearts when considering her future.
Thank you so much.
I made it at home.
Yes? Is there anyone else that wishes to speak? Okay, we'll bring it back to the board. Trustee Ayers, comment?
As far as the specifics of, or I guess guidance for the tranche goes, I'll just go, I guess, through the list.
Great.
For the air quality, the timing restrictions, I like that, as is set up in other ones. I also like sort of the general language of just saying state plus, right? It should state, obviously should be noted in there as being the bare minimum, just to say it again. But I like the addition of timing restrictions. For odor, I liked the recommendation or the suggestion that it be linked to the nuisance code to kind of keep the state out of that. So if the local inhabitants have X number of nuisance complaints, et cetera, that gets reported. And the other major point that I just wanted to address is I liked your suggestion of the conditions of approval to make it easier for everyone involved so that it's very clear what they are bringing to the table. And so a lot of the onus is put on the application process instead of on us for fixing any future code.
So that was the, like, separating it out, am I
Correct.
reading? Okay, yeah. I didn't mean to interrupt.
That's it.
That's it, okay, great. Mayor Pro, or sorry, Trustee Hardy?
Nothing really.
Okay. Trustee Butler?
I guess my comment is you know, I think it makes sense to stay in alignment with what we went with. I think your words were strict but not setting precedent for this tranche two with health and safety. I would just agree with that in general. I think it does make sense, or I like the idea of Trustee R's, comment of with, as you mentioned, noise and odor likely being the largest complaints we, could receive. I think the town, it makes sense for us to have awareness of whoever's receiving that complaint, the town is aware of it as well. If the oil and gas operator is getting those complaints, they need to, I think, pass those on to the town, so we can, track and log them down. Otherwise, I think the COGC has a lot of those, areas covered, like you mentioned. And then the final comment or question, I guess, is I agree with the, conditions of approval. I don't personally want to rehash this every, few months as technology improves or changes. But regarding bringing it for the board, was it your suggestion that we keep, some of that language subjective to allow the board the opportunity to review each and every application?
Yes, I mean, you would be reviewing, assuming that you want the board to have the final say, you would be reviewing each and every application. But you could retain flexibility to say, this is what we are saying our conditions of approval now, but if something comes before us that is more protective of health and safety, we have the ability to insert that in there as a condition of approval. So for example, let's say that, the best known technology now would be a tier 3 engine for fracking. But later it becomes a tier 4 engine, and then later a tier 5 engine. 5 years from, the conditions of approval could say tier 3, but 5 years from now, you could say, look, clearly tier 5 has come along, it's viable, we're gonna impose tier 5 as part of our conditions of approval. So you can retain flexibility, if that makes any sense.
It does. I guess I'll just ask staff, do you concur or agree with the board reviewing? I just don't want to get, here's my thought, or I guess concern is, we get stuck in the mud in reviewing all the intricacies and subjectivities of each application. I'm not an oil and gas expert, I'm first to admit, and I really don't want to be. I don't know if it's really the board's purview. I understand the subjectivity concept, but staff's, I guess, question is, do you think it's the best way to proceed with this?
It's always hard to answer that question, if I'm being honest. I think it is a way to proceed. I think some of that depends on how much the board wants to have oversight.
Okay. That's what I'm just, obviously debating in my own mind at the moment. Otherwise, great presentation. I really appreciate the information. It's very comprehensive and thorough. That's all I have.
Okay, thanks. Trustee Murphy.
I gotta agree with everything that's been said by the other trustees. I agree that we are not interested in setting new precedent, but obviously we want strong and strict regulations that uphold some of the highest set out by some of the municipalities in the state. Looking at the process, I would agree that, best management practices throughout the application process is probably the preferred way to go. Just taking a look, at some of those primary issues, I had a chance to look over multiple municipalities, and for me, it seems like Broomfield kind of sets kind of the best standard, especially on like air quality, odor, noise. I want to agree with, especially for odor and noise, I think town notification is very important for those aspects. And then for kind of the remaining issues, looking at transportation, seismic issues, wildlife, lighting, I think it's important to be very cohesive with kind of what we have with the existing ordinances and code, particularly looking at lighting and how that works for a site with dark sky. Otherwise, I really think your memorandum was very clear. I really appreciated kind of the breakdown. I have no improvements on that, I guess, so thank you for breaking it down in a very comprehensive but easy to understand way, so.
Great. Trustee Sorcelli.
I also am grateful for the breakdown. I feel like you do a really thorough job of highlighting all those areas of concern and showing where we fall with other municipalities or the county or the CODC, and that helped tremendously. And then being able to review some of them, I agree with Trustee Murphy that Broomfield's regulations seem to be a really great standard. And I also put a caveat that I appreciate the Goldilocks approach and that we're not trying to set a standard, but we are trying to increase our standards tremendously from where they are. Even reviewing the couple that we have in place, like wildlife, that we're gonna implement some mitigation. There's so much more we could be doing with those things to show our citizens that safety and wildlife and welfare are the highest importance. So I appreciate that being able to see that and review it and see where we can go and what we can do. I loved the way that you approached the conditions of approval. I feel like that was a much better approach to me than a standard shoot that we're gonna put all of them through and then we get no say or review or revision as a board or a community over how those things are coming through. And I think for me, I don't want to get into the weeds of reviewing these every time they come through as a board. However, when they do, it gives the community and citizens opportunity to come forward and have a say, as each application will be different. There will be a different area and different impacts on wildlife for the community. And so I think reviewing them on a case-by-case basis would be similar to when we approve a development, that it has to go through that shoot of here are the conditions of approval first, and then the staff reviews it and says that only if you meet these guidelines are you even gonna go before the board. And that way, by the time it gets to us, we can say it meets it, unless there's a reason for justifying us to pick it apart, we're not going to pick it apart. Unless there's some extenuating circumstances that would make us have a higher level of scrutiny or standards. I just thought that would be a good process, the conditions of approval. I also agree with Trustee Grace about the chemicals, having the proprietary chemicals not mentioned, and we're not able to be aware of what those are. I think that is a huge red flag for me too. What we're putting in the ground in our community should be public. So that's something that stuck out to me as well. And I appreciated the general statements within our code and then maybe some specific requirements. But in general, a guide that shows what our intentions are for approving these and just increasing that level of quality of safety and welfare and wildlife in the community. I hope that made sense.
Thank you, yeah. Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, everybody said everything so much better than I could. I think the only thing I can add to it is I'm very much in favor of some of the stricter side. I don't think there's anybody here saying I want less safety or I want less regulations regarding environmental treatment. Likewise, you know, the proprietary chemicals, that's always chapped me, to be honest, but yeah. I definitely also agree with the best management practices. I think that's gonna be a great way to handle potential problems. Again, everybody's also just said it, so that's all I really had to add to that.
Okay. I'm gonna go with the prairie dog thing. Does anyone have a problem with the wildlife thing? Is that, I mean, if there's a state program to relocate, is that a problem with anyone, or we just wanna gas them? Okay, great. All right,
Don't
if
we
we
have a
could just
rocket
add
testing
that.
facility that can handle it?
What?
We have a rocket testing facility that can handle it?
They're looking at, yeah, anyway.
Mayor?
Yeah.
I just had one more comment.
Please, go ahead.
I just meant to thank Mrs. Tassie. Your comments were so beautiful and really captured the heart of Berthoud. And I think the way that we all feel about Berthoud is that beautiful landscape. It's why we're here. And it just put that at the center of our conversation when you shared that. So thank you. Just wanted to share that.
Awesome. Well, that was gonna be my final thing too. But,
Sorry, I'm sorry.
well, before we get to that, Mr. Foote, do you have any further questions for clarification reasons of anything we missed? Some of these are options and,
No, I think this gives me some pretty good general direction, and my next step will be to put together kind of a series of regs for you to take a look at, pick apart, suggest new ones. I was thinking along the lines of what we did last time, maybe put some options out for you. So that'll be the next step.
okay, great. Well, I agree with the whole board on this and just add the prairie dog thing, and I think the noise monitoring and the sound, or the same thing would be great. The dust mitigation, has there ever been any thought about non-treated water? Has anyone put that in specifically?
So you want to make sure it's non-potable.
Non-potable.
Yeah.
It would just be interesting to know.
Okay.
And then I wanted to thank you, Ms. Tassi, too, and I wanted to answer, or my opinion on, even from your last public comment. We're not trying to make this, what happened was this was state preemption, and because of the gentleman in front of you, we have a chance to even speak on this tonight. Before, it was just kids with nosebleeds, and everyone was okay with that. So the fact that we even have this ability to talk is the board saying, we're not okay with the state minimums. And as far as why are we doing this with the look, we still have a chance to adjust this. I went through some pretty traumatic stuff in the last couple of years trying to just outright ban this, because I agreed with your comments last time around. It was really murky. I had Colorado Oil and Gas Association go after me. I got into the Denver Post. And then it came down to a particular article I read that I guess it was one of the prime sponsors, not Mr. Foote, that said in front of the Capitol, that was a proponent of Senate Bill 181, that this is not a ban. And just that wording alone was enough that this article was saying that would, any kind of challenge you would lose, because the oil and gas industry would say, one of the prime sponsors said this is not a ban, and now they're trying to ban it. And I'm not saying that we're trying to do this in any other way. I think we're proposing appropriate limits, and I agree with Mayor Pro Tem Grace. I'd rather stick to the stricter side. Maybe our prairie dog thing later will make precedent, but and that this goes with unrelated, but we did talk about, this goes with the losing the view with development too. This isn't an issue of does the board like this or not. Some of these are not up to our control. It's what can we do with annexed land to make it better. But as far as going ahead or not, that's a condition with the annexation itself, but not when the land's already annexed. So I think we're doing the best we can. I think we have the best gentleman, in my opinion, in the state to lead this. I've had the pleasure of working with you elsewhere, and I'd say a fairly strict environmentalist without being super crazy, and not known to be really kowtowing to the industry. So I'm just really appreciative we have you, and this style of this level of detail, this length of time to give us the ability to think about it. I just really appreciate that we have the opportunity to work with you.
Great, thank you.
Anything else, board?
Yeah, not to talk just to talk, but to Ms. Tassie's comments, I mean, I would, it doesn't specifically come up, but I consider the views and the character of the town to be part of health and welfare when I consider things. So it's not that we're not thinking about it, it doesn't specifically come up as that point, but that's how I consider it. So just to assuage some of your concerns.
Okay. All right, if there's nothing else, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
We need to extend.
Oh, we do. Would anyone like to move to extend past 9:30 for our meeting tonight? We still have an executive session to go through.
I'll move to extend the meeting until at or before 10:30.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
I think we'll be all right with that. Clerk, we have a roll call vote, please. The motion's been seconded.
Mayor Pro Tem Grace?
Yes.
Trustee Hardy?
Yes.
Trustee Ayers?
Yes.
Trustee Murphy?
Yes.
Trustee Sorcelli?
Yes.
Trustee Butler?
Yes.
Mayor Karsbeck?
Yes. Okay, we're gonna go into reports tonight. We won't be taking any action, so we can go into reports, and if we have direction, we can do that. So yeah, we'll move on to reports right now. Sorry, I was thinking out loud. And we can start out with, we'll just go right to left here. So Trustee Sorcelli?
The only thing I was gonna bring up was, the contract with internet provider or Hilltop, and I just would like to ask staff where we're at with the possibility of a different contract, and if there is even opportunity to entertain other bids or people to come forward and provide us information such as Hilltop. I know you know, Chris, but I am still very disheartened that we couldn't work with our local provider who's invested a lot in the community, not just the fiber, but the way that he helps with birthed facilities and events and that type of thing. So I just wanna know where we're at and what opportunities there are, and also if we should have him come back for an agenda item, just to show us what the organization does in our community, because I think a lot of people don't know the extent of it, so.
Where are we at right now?
I think we mentioned this before, but we've been talking to Level and Pulse about the opportunities that might exist for them to come and build a network in town and operate that network. I think from staff's perspective, it doesn't really make any difference to us who does it. So long as they're capable of providing the kind of service that the board and the community wants, and they can do that at a price that we think is appropriate. So whether that's Hilltop or Allo or Pulse, I think that the idea of combining together with Meade, Milliken, and Johnstown, I think is, I don't know that it's I don't know that it's a foregone conclusion that that's not going to happen. I think it's less likely today than it was before. And so I think it makes more sense potentially now for the town to go after its own solution, and that could be Hilltop or Pulse or anybody else. I think for clarity though, Allo, Allo was gonna pay to build a network, and all we were gonna do is give them the right to do that, and then work with them on some expedited permitting. And that deal, I think, as we explained before, wasn't exclusive. And so if Hilltop wanted to do the same thing, we would be happy to work with them as well. If the board wants to hear from Hilltop, that's perfectly fine from my perspective.
Well, let's follow on Trustee Sorcelli's. What would be the next step if we wanna, this Pulse thing has been out in the air, heard $19 million, like what would be the next step to keep this on track?
Well, on our internal calendar and in our conversations with Loveland Pulse and the county, our plan was to bring that to you on May 9th. For them to kind of walk you through, some of this is driven by the county's vision, some of this is driven by Loveland Pulse, some of this is driven by town staff trying to find a solution to whatever it is we're trying to do, so.
So what is staff doing to have the same conversations with Hilltop as they are with Pulse?
We're not. We haven't talked to Hilltop since the RFP process that we went through originally.
So we got Pulse coming in on the 9th. I guess we could invite Mr.
And if the board would prefer that we just stop where we're at and reissue a new RFP, that might be the easiest thing to do, rather than, kind of pick and choose who we talk to. I don't know that that's gonna be helpful in the long run, so.
Well, I mean, talking to the county, they're kind of provider agnostic, and I'm gonna screw his last name up, so I'm not even gonna say it, but
Fatfinger, I think is who you're thinking of.
What?
I think it's pronounced Fatfinger, but Fatfinger.
totally screwed that up, thanks.
Oh, sorry, we're talking about two different people.
Yeah, well, I mean, he could use it with the county and so could Pulse, so I guess issuing an RFP, but maybe there's a way to do both, or I guess that might be too complicated. I just agree with you, Trustee Sorcelli, I'm trying to think on the spot here.
I had a quick question on that. Did Hilltop respond to the original RFP?
I honestly can't recall. Sorry, Walt has left already.
I believe they did, and the reason Eric was so angry is he wasn't considered, and he actually even went out to Weld to speak on it, and so they put some in, and I think the reasoning was those small providers just can't do it, and then his point was, I just did all Platteville, what are you talking about?
Okay.
Yeah.
I think in the context of providing a full build out to all four communities, Meade, Milliken, Johnstown, and Berthoud, which is where we started, I don't think he had the financial capability. I could be totally wrong, and I think he argued that maybe he could, I don't know. But in the evaluation of the RFP with the broadband consulting firm that we hired, they felt like that, the four communities together with the recommendation from that consulting firm felt like that was not the best option for the four towns.
So to clarify, since that agreement fell through, we haven't issued a new RFP for services specific just to Berthoud?
No, we just started talking to Pulse because they reached out to us kind of in parallel with that. We said, okay, well, what would that look like if Pulse were able to provide service to Berthoud? And the county agreed to fund some of that initial feasibility work because the county's trying to connect a whole bunch of communities together. Again, I think practically speaking, from town staff's perspective, we would not recommend that the town build and operate a network. And so who we choose to do that on our behalf, if that's the flavor of the board, then I don't think it matters to us. So long as they can provide the service, they can do that reliably, and they can do that at a price that we all agree makes sense. That would be our recommendation anyway. So if the board wants us to explore Hilltop, that's fine, we can do that too.
I think the fair thing is to go through a new RFP process, contact Hilltop and ask them to at least contribute their proposal.
Yeah, or to
Give
make
them
them aware.
opportunity to present as equally as any other provider if we're having any presentations. That way, it's fair. It's a fair process and there's no question. Does anyone agree?
I agree with you. How long would to get before?
It
How long
won't,
would that
it
take
won't happen fast. I mean, it'd be a few months at a minimum.
for the RFP?
I think so.
Keep it open for a month or two, and yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think to be honest, it would depend on what we're asking them to provide. And, so I think we'll have to kind of consider what that looks like.
Could we, instead of having Pulse come, could we just have that, something from them, from staff on the 9th?
Yeah, if you'd prefer not to have Pulse come, we can do that. That's no issue from our perspective.
Well, I'm just throwing out options.
Maybe that's a good solution. Just have that conversation on the night.
I guess I have no issue with, whoever ends up doing it. I guess my question is if we ask for another RFP, it's putting the brakes on everything. And we're essentially waiting, another time for this whole thing to kind of get spun up. Is that?
I mean, I think in some respect that's probably true. I don't know that will negate any of the work that's already been done if the board ends up going. I mean, there's years worth of work to do, I think, practically speaking, before the town has fiber to houses. I just don't think that's gonna happen quickly, even with the condition of Allo coming in and doing all their own design work, funding it entirely without any town contribution, all that stuff. That was gonna take, a couple of years before they were kind of turning the light switch on. So, I think it just depends on how quickly the board wants to move. I don't think a few months going through an RFP process is gonna really change things dramatically one way or the other.
Would that sour any kind of relationship or work that we're currently working through at Loveland?
I doubt it. I mean, Loveland is a public entity, right? This is not a private provider. They operate semi-independently from the city of Loveland, as a separate utility, but for all intents and purposes, we have a different relationship than we would with somebody like Allo, so I don't think they're gonna be offended. We haven't committed anything to them anyway. We're just kind of in exploratory conversations with them, and again, relying on the county to pay for some feasibility analysis work with the engineering firm that works with Pulse, so. And I think the county's happy to do that within the context of what they're trying to do anyway, so.
So do you think on the 9th, if the board wanted to, we could have like a draft RFP? Is that kind of cutting it with your capacity?
I just have to talk to Walt. Outside of he and I, nobody else internally has worked on this project. Neither one of us really have the expertise, but I think we have a pretty good idea of what we would be looking for. I don't think we'd be asking we're not asking for a specific bid per se, right? This is not like bidding a construction project. We're way short of that milestone. So I think in terms of gathering together some high level proposals from firms about how a network may get built in the town, and I just have to kind of think through it a little bit.
Mhm.
Yeah. And what would the criteria be that we'd be evaluating? Because I don't think they're gonna be prepared to provide construction costs or future rate costs and those kinds of things. And it's pretty early in the process to be able to make those kind of determinations, even just to estimate. I wouldn't trust any of that, to be honest. Other than just to know that it's a high level estimate. So I think what we'll be looking at is, firm capability, can you do it? How long would it take you to do it? Demonstrate that you've done it elsewhere, and then the board can decide if you want, who you want.
So maybe on that 9th, we just bring in, doesn't sound like we turn around that quick, so we could just bring in Eric, and then he could have his own presentation. if you wanna just hear from both and then go for a bid, or go for an RFP.
I think it'd be fair to hear from our own home turf people, our own private businesses that we could benefit, which would benefit our economy and our people first, and then if we find out that he isn't capable of the full rollout like we're hoping, then at least we entertained it and and had all of those options before us. So I'm in favor of May 9th either being an RFP or having him come forward and present, or both him and Pulse to compare. It might not be great to have them both in the same room, it might not feel very fun.
Well, we've done it before, the artists in a roundabout, so maybe we can.
That's true, make them sit next to each other and, you know, but whatever you guys think is fair, I just wanna make sure it's fair to our business owner that I feel like wasn't maybe a fair part of the equation before, and I understand it was a different situation, but now that it's changed, I think, I just wanna make sure that we
Yeah,
give them the option.
and I think it's more than he's local. I mean, like he said, his connection rate's pretty good, and I know someone that really likes him that has him in town, so it seems like he's not only local, but also pretty competitive. I mean, my brother loves Pulse too, and he's in Loveland, so it'll be an interesting thing, but I feel like we've given Pulse the opportunity, we should give him one too. Does anyone else have any thoughts on that?
No.
Cool. Can we invite him on the 9th and see if he? Let's show up. Okay, great. Anything else, Trustee Sorsili?
No, that's it, thank you.
For clarity, are you saying to invite him and Pulse, or just him?
Well, we already invited Pulse on the 9th, right?
We did, we can ask them not to come, I don't know if that really makes a big difference. I don't know that they'll be offended either way, but.
Yeah, it seems like they're a little less, I mean, they're not a private entity.
Yeah, I mean.
They won't be gunning that
they'd be
hard.
good to work with, so.
I think we should invite them. I don't think they'd be that offended to just hear someone else out. We're not asking like a bid that night. It's just, what do you do? What can you offer, right?
I think so, yeah.
It's kind of an interesting thing. Maybe we need to think on it more.
Yeah, I mean, you know, in either case, let's plan to discuss broadband on the 9th, and then maybe we, you know, at our next meeting in April, I can give you a better idea.
Okay.
It's a month, it's more than a month out, so I think we have some time to kind of sort through those details maybe. Without kind of committing tonight exactly what we're gonna do on the 9th.
Yeah, cool.
Sounds good.
All right, Trustee Murphy?
I got a few things. Had some citizens approach me about kind of our trash service situation in town. Obviously, rates have gone up.
Or what
for
service?
Trash service,
Oh.
by multiple companies and stuff that are, servicing Berthoud and stuff. Obviously, rates have gone up recently and stuff, and that's a concern for a lot of people, but we also have multiple services driving through town at, you know, almost every day of the week. And I don't know if anyone else has heard concerns about, you know, kind of, you know, the larger trucks constantly going up and down the streets to cherry pick kind of trash cans off the street, but, has any kind of, discussion happened? Forgive my ignorance on it.
No, you're dead on. For
you
the last
know,
20 years, my dad was talking about one time he did it and they got all the way to an ordinance level and there was so much pushback that they dropped it at the last minute.
Okay.
But I've heard this again and again. I'm not saying,
Mhm.
that was just, yeah, it's been a topic of conversation.
Okay, no, I figured I'd bring it up.
But are you wishing to have more of a conversation on that? 'Cause I'm not
You
trying
know,
to-
I think it's something we might have to take a look at in the future. I don't see any pressing need for it immediately, but, it's a concern that's come up on my
Yeah.
radar personally.
The franchise agreement or something?
Yeah, beyond that, we've got the Arbor Day celebration coming up, so I hope to see you all at that. It should be in Fickle Park. And then the big topic I wanted to bring up, which, CML has kind of notified everyone of, and is actually holding a meeting tomorrow addressing the issue. You can register for it, through their link. It's discussing, Senate Bill 23, -123, which is at the state capitol right now, being pushed by the governor and I believe the majorities in both houses. This is a bill that largely, addresses kind of the middle housing issue and is looking to tackle affordable housing. And CML is taking a stance against this bill, and they're kind of holding this emergency meeting tomorrow to kind of address how municipalities deal with this. just speaking from my experience as an architect and having affordable housing as a paramount issue for not only us, but up and down the Front Range, I think a lot of the aspects of the bill that I've seen so far are tackling kind of the right issues, but the way this bill is written, as stated, is a significant threat to our authority and our decision-making process and control over the issue. My personal opinion, it takes a sledgehammer to our zoning code versus what we can deliver as localities, where we can take a more precise solution that's much more accessible to our citizens and allows them to have a lot more input, whereas this bill would take a lot of that power out of our hands. So I'm more than willing to talk with any of you guys about it, but I think I will be participating in this virtual meeting tomorrow, but I think it's a significant issue. It's probably one of the biggest power shifts in state versus local when it comes to land use and zoning that's come up. So beyond that, I'll certainly attend tomorrow, but I think, you know, it might be something the board wants to take up, a letter of concern to our representatives down at the state capitol. So this is an ongoing thing. So I think it should be on everyone's radar because of the significance of the bill. What Administrator Kirk has brought up, I don't think we'll have too many issues addressing it should it go forward and be passed into law. But it is a significant concern, I think, from a planning and zoning perspective. So that's all I've got to say.
I agree. I signed up too. I think depending on tomorrow's, maybe we'll know better our stance, you know, as we talk with other municipalities or hear from them. So, no, but I completely agree. I think there's other bills here that concern me. I don't want to but just the idea of that the state can preempt growth caps, especially if they're coming from a citizens initiative, just kind of blows my mind that they're taking these stances. So I agree. I'd love to.
And just to add on to it, it does seem like in this session, the state has taken a liking to, you know, pursue code changes at a state level, which is not really how Colorado has operated. Some other states do, and maybe they do have a role in controlling, you know, some aspects of development. But as far as density and kind of housing, that's typically been, you know, a local issue. And I personally think it should stay a local issue. So that's it.
So maybe just to get that clarity, maybe we listen in tomorrow and decide how to proceed, and you could send it through an email.
Sure.
And then have it in reports or something next time to vote on. Talk about, I guess.
I appreciate your thoughts on that, by the way, because I agree that I think it takes away authority and power from the local level. And so I think whatever we can do to get clarification on how we can position ourselves to maybe stand against the new ordinances and make sure that we maintain our local authority.
My only weird thoughts with this is if this is guaranteed to go through, I mean, we learn more about it, but maybe we say something else and be a little more supportive, because we got 2 applications out, one with the senator, one with our congresswoman for micromobility. Maybe we could say the next step is to approve these for Berthoud so we can try to do these micromobility things. But I don't know, that was just a thought. I guess we'll see how, ultimately I agree with you. I just wonder if this is gonna, no matter what, gonna go ahead. Was that it?
Yeah, that's all I've got for tonight.
Trustee Butler?
Yeah, so I completely agree with Trustee Murphy on this new legislation. I've looked into it. I'm registered for the town hall meeting tomorrow as well. I'm concerned. I think it's a gross overreach of state government on a local level personally. I'm pretty concerned.
Well, especially with your HOA background, right? This kind of reaches into that.
Well, it's several factors. The more I read into it, and I didn't read all of it obviously, but the more I read, the more shocked I was. You know, how comprehensive it is. So I think it would be nice for us to collectively come to some consensus as a town and know how to respond to that. I think we'll get a better idea tomorrow. I also agree with the trash. This wasn't on my notes to bring up tonight, but I have also been approached by neighbors and community members through, you know, HOAs and whatnot regarding trash service, and I think it might be time to go ahead and have that conversation or look into it. Because there are too many services driving every day, and as we're now incorporating more, you know, diversity in our subdivisions and multifamily and alleyways, just makes it more complicated. And alleyways typically aren't constructed to handle the, you know, the weight loads. And I know of many alleyways in our town currently that are grading, you know, primarily from these heavy trucks. And then when they run every day, it just compounds that, that factor.
Does your HOA have a franchise?
No.
Okay.
We have a preferred
We have a preferred, we can choose
vendor,
your own.
but yes, it's.
Okay, I know like Prairie Star, I think they have a guaranteed one, but I was just curious, okay.
It's all over the place. Every community that I'm aware of,
Has their own.
it varies.
Okay, yeah, just curious.
And then no one really knows what to do about it. And then I think now the time is to address it because we have so many, you know, new projects coming online. It's so much easier to get this stuff set up up front as these new homes get built and homeowners move in and just know who to use.
Yeah, I agree. I actually talked to Republic Services about this, because you guys are right. It's been brought up many times before, because it's really unusual. I think Fort Collins is the only one close to us that I know of. And the rep from Republic was saying, you know, you don't have to do a single franchise agreement. You can do these, I think she called it districting, but you essentially bid for a certain area. So that, like, I really love our local Berthoud, I use United, which is Berthoud's, you know, little company. But I think if we did a franchise, the best deal is probably gonna be Waste Management. I'm just guessing, who knows? But there's other options too that we could look at maybe, if we're just trying to get one through an alleyway. But if we're trying to get the best deal, it's a similar conversation.
But then it kind of goes back on what May was talking about with our broadband. Why limit it to just one company? You know, we've got several small family trash companies in town, so Schlagers, United. You know, and the last time this came about, like you said, it brought a bunch of controversy with the citizens that didn't want to be limited to just one trash company. They want to be able to have a choice. Because if they don't like the service, then they can just go to the next guy. I remember Waste Management started doing contracts because they were fearful that we were going to limit it to just one company, so they started getting people to sign into contracts.
So where would we take, I mean, I think these are similar conversations. One or a district or none, but this
I
has
say,
been.
we've got enough metro districts in the area. If they want to limit it to one trash company, they have the power to do that, but.
I wonder if we couldn't also address the problem by limiting what companies can come at what time to sort of, to try to get, to limit.
Your day's
traffic
Thursday,
in
yours,
that way.
yeah.
Because I know I have a company and I see that truck basically all week in my neighborhood. It seems like they just kind of, whenever you move and sign up for the trash service, they put you on a day. It may or may not have anything to do with actually where you live. It's just the rotation.
Yeah.
Right, so if there's something that we could do to say company A can only come on certain days, get all their stuff done, company B, so that it's not, their trucks aren't coming back multiple days for the same area. I don't know, it's just.
My only comment on it, at one point, we had some construction work in the alleyways, and so in my neighborhood, we've got some houses that put their trash cans out on the paved street, and others keep it in the alleyway. And it's like, why can't we get it all back to one consistency and have it all be in the alley again? And we kind of fell on deaf ears, but.
I didn't even know.
Oh, yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, even on
Well, I think
East
there are a
Street, half
bunch
the
of
houses are
conversations, 'cause
alley
that's a-
pickup and the other half are street pickup.
That's like a similar one too, of limiting time, but also to keep one single truck. But there's still the issue if you have two different providers on one alleyway, you're gonna still have two different trucks no matter what. So I think we'd like to have this conversation no matter what. I think it's just, again, a staff capacity issue. If that's even possible
Anything's possible.
this year. I mean, cause it's something we could push off to the fall, it seems really pressing.
I don't think it's urgent.
Yeah.
But I
Just put it
think
on
it's
the
something
list.
yeah.
If If we find a slow night in the future, let's throw.
Put this in the parking lot, it'll go away, so, parking lot's like a graveyard.
I think, what we would need from you is just to define, we
Scope?
need to define some of that scope.
Yeah.
Can we throw some sort of survey out and make the water bill? Thoughts on-
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's probably some reasonable sense to doing some public outreach before we jump too far into this. There's a difference between a handful of folks who might be upset about trash service and the whole town wanting us to restrict their options. Arvada went through like recall petitions and stuff
Over trash?
because of trash hauling, and so and that's not unusual. This is one of those issues when a town says, hey, we're gonna limit your choice for who you use for trash in the future, and you will only use the haulers that we approve and that pay us, which is typically how that works. There are other folks who get real angry about that, so it's I think some public outreach would be a great place to start, and to kind of really gauge what is the community's desire with respect to trash hauling.
Open to fair enterprise.
That's something you wanna
I know that, like, when we did our American Community Survey last year, the lowest, really all of our kind of public services were very highly rated, even kind of relative to benchmark communities throughout the country that do the same survey. Trash hauling was probably the lowest rated. It was still really positively rated, but it was definitely the lowest rated service. So, I mean, there are folks, I think, who are generally less happy with that, but.
I've heard it too.
Yeah.
So not just you two.
My trash service.
I love mine, I'm fiercely loyal to them, but I get, cause I get that. I've heard that several times. So there, people going the other way. From a municipal standpoint, is the damage significant when you got multiple trucks coming through over years?
Trash trucks are very heavy, and the more trucks you have on the road, the more, long-term stress you place on that roadway. Alleys in particular are obviously not designed for that heavy truck traffic, not the ones that exist today.
Mine's dirt, does that matter?
No, and in fact, actually, dirt is probably the best option, relative to, short of completely rebuilding the alley, to withstand that level of load. And the start and stop is actually really stressful on the road too. It's not just the weight, but it's that,
Sure.
you just think about the stress that placed on the road laterally.
For the trash trucks, I want to build driving down the alley because they picked down all the snow.
Yeah, there you go. See, so it does have an impact on roads. Is it quantifiable in the sense that, like, we contribute X amount of degradation to the roadway to the trash trucks? Probably not. But I think it's kind of a well understood standard that trash trucks tear up roads. Outside of that, the only other reason to do kind of a franchise might be, whether it's exclusive or whether you break up the town in districts or whatever, would be to impose kind of what types of services are required. Like, everyone must receive a recycling cart as part of their service, or
That was in that original proposal.
limiting the
ordinance, is that
size of the
recycling had to be
carts.
free.
Limiting the size of the carts is often part of that deal. Or saying they must be a minimum of a certain size. Those are the kinds of things you might specify in a franchise agreement. We just have to decide kind of what does the community want, what does the board want us to kind of pursue. I don't know if it has a positive impact on rates or not. You can argue that in a competitive marketplace that they're giving you the best deal because they don't want you to go to one of the other 5 haulers in town.
Unless you got Comcast, then I can talk them down when I say I'm gonna quit.
Yeah.
Then they lower the price.
But you could also argue that when they compete and you kind of lock in a rate structure as part of a franchise agreement, that which I think you have some ability to do, that could provide some rate stability as well. So
So what would
Yeah.
you think is the next step as far as community outreach? Is that, could we put in the next American Community Survey, or is that like years off, or?
Our expectation was that we would do an American Community Survey every 2 years. That
Okay.
we would recommend to you next year that we budget for that again, and that will, we had kind of a baseline in 2021. 2022.
Yeah, the
Sorry,
COVID.
Thank you.
COVID one.
And then we do it again in 2024. So I don't know, I think in the context, I think we're gonna want more specific information than what we gather out of the American Community Survey, which is just kind of broad, like, you know, how happy are you with your trash service? Yeah, I think we'd wanna dig in a little more, so, there are plenty of firms out there that could do that. I think we'd wanna do that in some kind of reasonably statistically valid way, right? Like not a Facebook poll. And so, but I think it'd be a handful of questions. Are you happy with the service that you have? Do you have interest in the town, designating an exclusive hauler, if it would have a positive impact on rates or something like that? I don't know.
Yeah.
We come up with a handful of reasonable questions. It'd be pretty easy to gather that info.
Is that something you think we could do on our own, or something that we could put in the budget to get a third party?
I think we're probably better off having a third party do it, just to, both for kind of neutrality reasons, but also for, because I think you're less likely to get accused of us like manipulating the data and stuff
Right.
like that, which will happen. And then I think, I don't know, we really have the capability to do what I would call a statistically valid survey, with some kind of reasonable margin of error. So I think we'd recommend probably if you wanted to do that, we'd look for a firm.
Well, would that be a budget next year? We probably couldn't adjust that much, or?
My guess is that the cost would probably be in the 10,000 range, plus or minus, to do a survey of that magnitude. Some of that depends on who you choose and kind of what the methods are.
Would you guys be okay with waiting for budget season? If you can remember, because I can't.
We could,
It's pressing.
we could probably incorporate it into our mid-year adjustment. I don't think that would be a significant effort. It'd just be,
Still need to
it'd be
clarify.
coordinating, yeah, I mean, I think probably the feedback we wanna gather, we could really easily define.
Okay.
That would be easy to do before we decide to go off and define scope. Then if, 70% of the town says, hey, I'm perfectly happy with my trash service, I have no interest in you doing an exclusive franchise, you might decide we don't need to define scope anyway. Depending on what kind of feedback we get.
That would have to come before the board as an agenda item anyway, so.
I think so,
Tim and
yeah.
I are a fan, we would just not go that way anyway. Yeah, okay. Is that?
Okay, that's good. Next comment I have is, I guess, a question. So I really appreciated, and I brought up in the last meeting, reports, when Jeremy Ellinger was represented here. A question of kind of the status, update of a lot of our projects we have going on in town. And so then he responded with an email that I thought was really helpful. I really appreciated that. Is that something we could have more regular? Just of all the various projects that we have going on at any given time?
Yep.
And just a kind of high level, just quick update.
Absolutely.
It'd be kind of like a detuned version of your administrator weekly. You used to do those really detailed, like what staff working on and like down to each plant, which was great, but I think.
Those got to be kind of heavy-handed.
Yeah, but maybe we
from
could
us as
detune
staff,
that
but-
of, this project just changed by a month or something, this is why. But yeah, I agree, that was awesome when Jeremy, he had it already, so.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm not asking for detail, just the status,
Yeah.
basic. That's it, other than I will be missing the next meeting. I'll be out of town. That's all I have.
Trustee Hardy?
Yeah, so just stuff from historic preservation. So our next meeting's Monday, May 8th. We're gonna have Lindsay Llewellyn and Sarah Capel from History of Colorado come talk to the meeting. They'll give us an overview of grants and opportunities that are available for presentation, and we'll be able to pick her brain a little bit on other stuff. Sarah will explain us how state tax credits work. So it'd be a really good meeting if you're owner of a historic home or property in town. The next one is gonna be held at, there's a big meeting at Berthoud Foursquare Church, be put on by Small Town Preservation. It's a workshop, it's April 12th from 1 to 5 p.m. Historic Larimer County is hosting this preservation workshop. It's free and open to the public. They have listed several other towns to attend as well. Bring up Main Street programs and community-led governments, aka preservation commissions, surveying and landmarking, grant funding and tax credits, and then question and answer afterwards. So 2 really good programs coming up if you are interested in any of the history of the town and any of the historic buildings, whether it be commercial or residential.
Very cool.
So,
Awesome.
and I forwarded that email to all the board members and Chris as well.
You did? Oh, okay, great. I'd love to attend that. Trustee Ayers?
I just wanna say thank you as always to Streets for the surprise on Monday. Driving to work was less fun in certain other municipalities, and I just wanna make sure.
You can say
that-
their names.
Does it
Lovely.
rhyme with Bubbland?
It may or may not rhyme with, but yeah, so certain parts of my drive were pretty scary, but I just appreciate all the work that they do to get the streets cleared and safe for all the traffic, so that's all I have.
Oh, I did have one more comment.
Yeah, go ahead.
It was very nice what the town staff did for Chief Anderson. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Last week. It was good to attend. And, yeah, so I just wanted to say thank you to Chris for calling me out in my poorly dressed out to present them with the key to the city, but anyway, yeah, great time. You all missed it, but, good cake. Anyway.
Good guy.
But I want to say thanks for that invite as well. Absolutely.
Anything else? Did I?
No,
Okay, Mayor Pro Tem?
Youth Advisory's meeting tomorrow morning, continuing work on Scorch Fest, June 9th and 10th. Yeah, that's really bad. I guess the only other thing is CDOT on 287, the left-hand turn lane lights. You know, CDOT's just really good at answering emails and working cooperatively. Same with the railroad and arguing with inanimate objects, I'm sure. Any updates, I guess, from them on any of that?
Not that I've heard.
Any-
I'd have to double check with Keith.
Anything regarding the railroad crossing of, through Mountain either?
No.
Okay.
Along with CDOT, Craig Patriquin, the commander of the VFW, has asked about the Justin Bauer Memorial Highway 56. The sign was removed out at Love's over a year ago, apparently, and they've been kind of keeping an eye on it. And he finally approached me and said, you know, the families were all kind of concerned. I said, I think it's construction. So I had the same issue. I emailed our regional transportation director. It's been over a week. She hadn't got back. Do you know by chance if I'm guessing it's construction? I'm just hoping that they'll
I would
never
assume
put
it was
back.
construction related, but I honestly don't know. I didn't realize that it had been taken down.
I neither till I said it. So I guess I'll just try to use the MPO and find another contact, or I might have the wrong email for Heather, but I'll keep on that. Just wanted
If
to
it's construction related, and I can reach out to the construction, the project engineer for that segment of the highway and just let her know that it was taken down.
That'd be
or
really great.
Construction needs to go back.
That'd be really great.
That shouldn't be too hard. I don't know if she might say, I don't know what you're talking about, but,
Mhm.
you know, it's probably an easy direct contact.
Awesome, okay. Administrator Kirk, we briefly talked about this, but it would, regarding pro code, it would just be good to kind of have them come in and explain what they do. Without getting into details, it'd be nice to kind of know what, how building codes enforcement works, and am I using the right term?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, yeah, it's absolutely building code enforcement.
Would anyone feel the same about having pro code come in and kind of describe how they do things and what happens if they miss something?
I would second that as an agenda item.
Would that be pretty easy to bring the head in?
Yeah, I've talked to Jonathan Giesek, who's our chief building official on our pro code about it. I think he'd be fine coming in and talking about how that works.
Do you think we could squeeze them in, or do you think it'd be kind of a long thing that we got to push off?
I think his presentation would probably be 10 minutes or less. I mean, I would assume, depends on how detailed you want to get
Yeah.
into. But, you know, just kind of broadly how they handle inspection processes, the services they provide to the town, how they handle issues that get identified and follow up. Yeah, I mean,
Is that something we could squeeze in pretty quickly here, or I guess
I would guess so, yeah.
Mike and I can look at it. If it looks ridiculous, we could push it off, but.
Yeah, I think, you know, we've got a couple of big items in the next couple of months. But again, I think his presentation will be relatively short, so I think, you know, and if the board wanted additional information, we could always schedule a follow-up rather than dive in,
Okay.
you know.
Does that work with everyone?
Yeah, I think it's a good idea.
MPO next Thursday, if I'm getting that right. Is that right, clerk?
Yes.
Yeah, next Thursday, MPO, we'll have our meeting here at Town Hall in the basement, so you guys are all welcome to attend. Dinner served at 5, and then meeting starts at 6. But if you guys just want to show up for some food and meet other elected officials, good opportunity. Food's always really great. We always have a ton of it, so You don't have to stay for the meeting, but, yeah, just welcome to come. And in other locations, hit or miss if other council members show up, but kind of nice if you guys want to meet other elected officials. Limerick County Sheriff's Office, what was the date again? It was April for the,
April 15th.
April 15th for the open house. We have 3 signed up, and they are looking for just a kind of a final opportunity to RSVP because they got to get food out.
Yeah.
Okay, April 15th. So we have 3 signed up. If anyone else is interested, trustees, I guess an email went out, so just respond to that. Okay, great.
I don't think I ever responded.
I don't think I'd be there. Hammond Trees, just want to thank you, Administrator Kirk. It's really great that we're getting on that. It's been, a couple years grinding, and it's nice that make it working with them.
We're working on it. I'm not sure how that will be resolved ultimately.
Yeah, but you on the email said you're going through some options there.
We are, I suggested some possible collaborative solutions with the Metro District. The long and short of it is, it was on my report, because I figured I'd give you guys a brief update. If you don't, I'll just give you kind of a 2-second version, but, the landscaping and filings 2 and 4 of Hammond Farm, which is primarily south of Waterman, Street and north of 10E. That landscaping was installed back in 2019. There's a 1-year warranty period on that landscaping. It was inspected in 2020 by town staff, and dozens of trees were identified for replacement. There was a follow-up inspection done. There were 7 trees that weren't replaced. I actually can't find documentation that they were required to replace those in 2020, those last 7. But at the time, staff walked with the Metro District Management firm, our arborist, our construction observer, and went through and tagged all the trees that needed to be replaced at the time prior to warranty. So outside of those 7, I think at the time when warranty was released, all of those trees were still in suitable condition, at least according to those that did the inspections. This is all based on what I can kind of find from the documentation that we have. For whatever reason, a whole bunch of those trees died like within the next year. I don't know if that was maintenance related. I don't know if it was environmental. I don't know if it was bad planting. I just know when the warranty expired, those trees were all alive and in decent condition. So at that point, it's the Metro District's responsibility as the property owner, the underlying property owner, to replace. They say they don't have the money to make those replacements. And so
So that might be something we could put on the model Metro District service plan, is that there's an ample budget for this?
it actually already is, what our suggestion is that, in the model service plan, or the service plan policy and the associated IGA, that a developer would be obligated to fund maintenance activities until there's enough assessed value to take over. And that they could do that in a reimbursement arrangement with the district, like if they were front loading that and the district could pay them back in the future, I think. But at a minimum, the developer would be obligated to maintain those until that subdivision was done. And that's the real problem that we've been having, is that when the improvements get installed, they pass their warranty period. In most cases, the Metro District accepts those improvements, right? Because they're not coming to the town. They're not public improvements in that sense. Not going to be owned and maintained by the town in the future. The Metro District accepts those typically when the developer's in charge of the district. And then the district doesn't have money to maintain them because there's not enough assessed value yet. So I think we can correct that in future situations. And that would be part of our standard IGA with the Metro District.
Well,
How to fix that solution now, other than us, I talked to our forester about potentially providing trees at a reduced rate, at the rate we pay for them, or even just providing trees entirely in order to help expedite the replacement. The Metro District's plan is to replace a few every year until they're all put back. I don't think that's a good solution.
I just meant to be positive, so I just
I
appreciate you working on it.
appreciate that. I just wanted to give you kind of a
Yeah,
thorough
that's
update
great.
about where
In
we're
my email, I should have clarified, I think the town, I'm not speaking for the town, but it would make sense for the town to, I think it's okay if the town played a role in helping out financially. Just because it is odd, the amount that have died that I haven't seen in other developments. It's almost like
it was
something
really
happened.
weird to us too, that just all of a sudden
Do you know if
They're
that's
all they're all in irrigated areas.
Yeah,
so
I'm wondering if it's something to do with that particular contractor, if we've used them elsewhere.
It could have been, I mean, we didn't, it's a reputable
Reputable company,
contracting firm that did that work as
So
far
they
as I
know what they're doing.
And, you know, again, we have a slightly different process now where the forester goes out and inspects the trees prior to planting rather than after the fact. It used to be that we went through and did the inspection, make sure they were staked properly and there weren't root balls above the ground and those kinds of things. We didn't inspect all of that prior to it getting planted. And I think in some cases you know, if they're root bound or whatever else. But, you know, it could be too that the maintenance firm used some, you know,
Odd
chemicals and pesticides on the ground they shouldn't have, and, you know, we don't know what those are, but it is weird that so many of them
Yeah.
died.
Yeah.
So,
I appreciate you guys working on that. And the previous forester, Josh Embry, had an idea one time of possibly just taking a year and hiring a ton of seasonals and just, your job is to plant trees all summer. So, maybe, you know, that down the road, that might be an option.
Yeah.
We get them at a reduced government rate and get a bunch of teenagers and that's their job.
Mhm.
In town too, okay, that's great. And the other, last one was kind of with the fiber thing, but it's with the, other municipalities have this where, the developer is required to put in fiber conduit. I think that'd be a great idea, and Administrator Kirk, you had a good point of, well, it's easy said, but we need a map of where those go.
We talked to Level and Pulse about that a little bit, just in kind of broad conversation, not in detail, but they said, you know, we would recommend that you not just have developers decide where to put conduit, and just like Excel or any other utility, like when you go to build a subdivision, Excel tells you where the power goes, right? And then Excel designs the system and then you install it. And so Love and Pulse said that's really the best case scenario is, you know, whoever you're working with, they say they participate in the design of that infrastructure prior to it getting installed. The developer obviously then installs it as part of the required public infrastructure. That was their recommendation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that something, I mean, so it's just, we're coming up with two massive developments coming up.
Yep.
And we would need that, you know, 19 million, if that's what Loveland's quoting, the horizontal boring probably being the brunt of it, maybe we could save millions by getting ahead of this.
Potentially.
Is that a possibility to?
On the new subdivisions, I think, again, I think it depends on who we're gonna ultimately use, right?
Yeah, Loveland or
Each-
Hilltop or Rise.
Yeah, and you know, I don't know how specific it is, like, you know, I know how water systems work, right? And like, we might have different valve standards than another utility, but they all work, you know, they're all, we might require a certain type of valve where another municipality might require a different type of valve, but they're still both valves, they turn the water on and off. I don't really know how it works with broadband. I would assume that conduit and pull boxes and, you know, cabinets for switching and all the things they do, I think would be relatively similar, but I just don't know. So we'd have to decide whose standard we wanted to adopt, I guess is what I'm saying. But I would assume that if we adopted, say, Loveland Pulse's construction standards, that those would be sufficient for nearly any utility regardless of who pulls fiber through them in the future.
Okay.
I think. I just don't know the answer to that
Sure.
question, but I think that's true.
It'd be interesting to look in further before these
Yeah.
big developments break ground.
Yeah, we kind of started that conversation with Loveland Pulse and, you know, what would it take to make that happen? Obviously, depending on who we choose to work with, assuming the board wants to do that, either one of them is gonna have construction standards and help with design on those big developments.
Does that make sense?
That's a great point.
Okay. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, that's all I have. Thanks. Staff?
The only two other things that we haven't talked about, I wanted to just bring up, on April 19th is the next time that the school district board will be meeting in Berthoud, and as we've done in the past, they've invited us to dinner. April 19th, it's a Wednesday, that would be from 5 to 6 p.m. at the high school. I talked to Dr. Schaefer about, you know, I think there's, in the context of the Ludlow neighborhood master plan, there was a lot of conversation about, you know, can the schools handle this? And I appreciate the comments that were made tonight. I disagree with some of them, but we don't just wash our hands of, you know, other issues, but certainly the district has a responsibility to plan for their future, and we talked to them about what developments are in the pipeline and we coordinate from that perspective, but I suggested Dr. Shaver might be a good idea to kind of talk to the board about, how does their planning process work? That was a big topic of conversation the last time we met with them as well, but I think it's probably worth discussing again. He said they'd be prepared as staff to kind of have a kind of a detailed conversation about their planning processes and how that works.
Can we invite P and Z?
I was just gonna say.
I actually suggested that to him. He said we'd be happy to have him come.
I talked to him about it too.
And they're providing dinner, so I'm
Got
glad he said, yes, we'd be happy to have them come. So April 19th, and I'll send you a calendar invite. They said they'd send me one this week. I'll forward it along or maybe I did already. I don't think I did. And then the planning commission will also be having a training from CIRSA about quasi judicial hearings and liabilities associated with development review processing and all the stuff the planning commission does. I understand Ann mentioned that to Mayor Karspek in particular, but I think you suggested it might be a good idea for the board as well.
I agree.
We'd be happy to.
I'll remember that, but I think it's great. I think we should include the board on it.
So.
Can we have it at a board meeting, or do we all go to the
Yeah, I mean,
planning and zoning?
our thought was we would do it independent of the planning commission meeting, because I think there's some different issues. But there's obvious overlap, but also different issues, and so.
Well, is
we thought we'd
it
schedule
issues
something
that
in
we could
June, perhaps.
potentially run into as well? It seems that we're so similar, might as well.
I mean, I would think that the issues that CIRSA would cover for this board
Mhm.
would be broader.
Right.
Quite a bit broader than what CIRSA would cover for planning.
Okay.
and zoning.
Okay.
It would be that and then some,
Mhm.
right? So if the board is
We go to
interested in that-
CML and you get that quasi judicial seminar.
That's true.
Well, and I think if you're gonna have Tammy Tonoy from CIRSA here, what I've seen in the last 30 years of Tammy coming to my municipal clients and doing that training is it touches on open meetings,
Mhm.
open records, quasi judicial process.
Yeah, she's
just-
great.
Yeah,
She came to one of our retreats
She is.
years ago, so. it was-
she's really great.
She sent us over some presentations they've done for other communities. I think there's a lot of good info in there, so if the board's interested in that, we can work on scheduling that probably sometime maybe in June.
Yeah. And I think everyone knows, but just in case, that there are insurance, Colorado Interagency Risk Sharing Association or something, but yeah.
Yep, that's it.
Awesome, thank you. Attorney Smith?
I have a really long, no. I have nothing, Your Honor.
Did you see my email about how they're able to, is that something I should
I-
not bring up? or-
No,
Okay.
I did, and I will dash something off to you.
Great.
I mean, I think Planner Johnson did a really good job of responding.
Oh, I missed that.
Okay, well, maybe that was just between the two of us. Generally, I would say that is unusual,
Mhm.
in the city of Louisville,
Banning more than 5 gas stations?
limiting the number of gas stations. But they are a home rule city, so when it comes to their land use authority, state law says it's plenary.
What does that mean?
Completely unlimited, right? If it's a matter of land use, if it's a land use matter, then it's a matter of pure local concern. And so that home rule city gets to
Total control over that.
it gets to legislate in a way that it doesn't have to comport with any conflict in state law. So it can even conflict with state law
And they went.
as a home rule city in an area where it has plenary authority. It fills up the whole area with its ability to legislate. As a statutory municipality, statutory town, we don't have that.
We can't limit
We
it
have to
use.
look to the specific authority in state statute. But that said, I think, and it'd be something we'd wanna look into a little bit more. There is the general authority under state statute for a statutory municipality to exercise its police powers. And that's a fairly broad power for a statutory municipality. So that's kind of just shooting
Yeah,
from the
thank you.
hip. But I think if that was something the board wanted to entertain, we'd wanna look into it a little bit more.
I just heard it before on why can't you do this and that, to see, yeah, they did it.
It was a
I
great
like, What the
question,
heck, yeah.
I
I
brought
mean,
that up
our
before once.
entrance seem to be gas stations and vehicle stuff, so, anyway. Just my thoughts are, thank you for clarifying. All right, anything else from the board? Anyone like to move us into executive session?
I'll do it. I move to enter into executive session pursuant to CRS section 24-6-4024F for discussion of a personnel matter and not involving any specific employees who have requested discussion of the matter in open session, any member of this body of any elected official, the appointment of any persons to fill an office of this body or of an elected official, or personnel policies that do not require the discussion of matters personal to particular employees. And the following details are provided: Town Administrator Annual Evaluation.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion by trustee Ayers, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Grace. Clerk, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Trustee Butler?
Yes.
Trustee Ayers?
Yes.
Trustee Hardy?
Yes.
Trustee Sorcelli?
Yes.
Trustee Murphy?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Grace?
Yes.
Mayor Karsbeck?
Yes. All right, thank you.